I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order for Tuesday evening, March 16th, 2021. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternate means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12th, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the Town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Harbor Media is broadcasting this live, for which we are grateful. If there is anyone else who is recording or intends to take any video or any still photographs during this meeting, could you please identify yourself by raising your hand? Seeing none. I would also just announce for the record that the members of the board that are participating remotely are myself, Mary Power, Joe Fisher, and Bill Ramsey. Thank you all for being here this evening. The first order of business, it is my pleasure to turn this over to Town Administrator Tom Mayo with an important organizational announcement. Tom?
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. So I'm going to read a memo that I prepared for the board because I think it is thoroughly lays out the process that we followed in determining how we would fill our Deputy Chief of Police role. And without burying the lead, I will hereby announce that we have appointed Lieutenant Ryan O'Shea to be the new Deputy Chief in Hingham. So that's very exciting. But I'll read the process so everyone can see it and or can hear it and understand the process that was followed. So in accordance with the authority assigned to the Town Administrator per Chapter 263 of the Acts of 2016, an act relative to the Town Administrator in the Town of Hingham, I have conducted an appropriate hiring process for the position of the Deputy Chief of Police, resulting in my appointment of Ryan O'Shea to that position. On February 25th, 2021, at my direction, our Human Resources Department posted internally an advertisement for the position of Deputy Chief of Police. This posting closed on March 4th, 2021. We received a total of 1 application. Upon receipt of the application materials, I performed a reference check. After receiving a positive reference, I then convened a review team of myself, Assistant Town Administrator Michelle Monsegur, Chief of Police David Jones, and Fire Chief Steve Murphy. Upon review of the application materials, we determined that an interview was warranted, identified questions, and scheduled the interview for March 8th, 2021. Lieutenant O'Shea attended the interview and answered all questions with great skill and passion. Upon completion of the interview, I asked the panel their thoughts, and all members agreed that Lieutenant O'Shea was qualified and, in fact, an excellent candidate. Following this interview, I engaged the services of Creative Services, Inc. to perform a thorough background check. The background check was received with all clear results indicating no concerns. As a result of the above process and my own judgment of Lieutenant O'Shea's character, skill, readiness, professionalism, and passion, and consistent with the authority of the Town Administrator, I contacted Lieutenant O'Shea on Friday, March 12th, 2021, and offered the position of Deputy Chief of Police, which he verbally accepted. The appointment was made official with Lieutenant O'Shea's formal swearing-in ceremony conducted by Town Clerk Eileen McCracken on Monday, March 15th, 2021 at 4:15 p.m. And it was attended by the on-duty and other members of the police department and some folks from Town Hall on the steps out front. And it was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the new Deputy Chief's career and to thank him for his dedication. So.
Thank you. Chief Jones, would you have anything to add?
Sure, Mary, thanks very much. I've worked with now Deputy Chief O'Shea in various roles since he was hired, and I've always known him to be fair, firm, and consistent. He rose to the ranks, and I witnessed him to develop into a real role model for other officers to follow, especially the newer officers. And he continues to embody our core values of integrity, service, excellence, and leadership. and I'm confident that he'll continue to work to uphold the exceptional reputation and level of services that the Hingham Police Department has been able to provide. And I'm really excited to start working with him in his new role.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe Fisher, you're the Selectman Liaison to Public Safety. Any comments?
I am also very pleased that Ryan O'Shea is our Deputy Chief of Police. I have spoken with Dave Jones, Chief Jones, about him. I've also spoken to others, and everyone is highly complimentary. I think this is a major contribution to the department, his willingness to serve in this role. And I look forward to seeing him from time to time, hopefully not in an adversarial situation. But I think this is a welcome move for the town.
Thank you. Bill Ramsey?
Yeah, Ryan, just thrilled with your appointment. You know, Tom and Dave talked about character and integrity, and I would add to that mentorship. I think you're going to be a great role model, leader, and a mentor for the younger officers. And just thrilled to see this. A lot of people might not know this, but I mentioned it when Chief Jones was appointed. Him and I were class of '93. Ryan was HHS class of '92. So now we have, Hingham High School graduates and leadership in the department. And it's great. I think you guys are going to be a great team, and thrilled to see you appointed Ryan's wife as a lieutenant in Situate. And it was great to see your mom there yesterday too, Ryan. Hadn't seen her in many years. So congratulations to you and your family. A great day for Hingham and a great day for the HPD.
And I would just add that while as Mr. Mayo said, that this appointment rests with the town administrator, I and the rest of the board 100% endorse this appointment. I've had the privilege and the honor of interacting with now Deputy Chief O'Shea in my years of service, both on the advisory committee and on the Board of Selectmen. He is the consummate professional. I also was able to see him interact when he played a leading role in the Citizen Police Academy. And I think that a lot of the interactions that I saw embody many of the things that are important to the police department. Bill, Joe, and I were all just so fortunate yesterday to be able to attend this swearing in. It was very cold, it was very windy, but it was also very clear seeing the department that Deputy Chief O'Shea, you have the support of the Hingham Police Department, and you've earned that not only in what you've done, but how you've done your job. We congratulate you on this appointment. We wish you all the luck in the world, and we are very grateful and looking forward to you and Chief Jones moving ahead for the town of Hingham. At this point, Deputy Chief, I'd like to open it up for any comments that you'd like to make.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Select Board, the Town Administrator, Assistant Town Administrator, Chief Jones, my fellow officers, and the citizens of Hingham for this extraordinary opportunity. I grew up in Hingham, attended Hingham schools, and worked for many years at a local business in downtown Hingham. I'm extremely fortunate to have been hired by the Hingham Police Department and advanced my career to this position. I am who I am and where I am today because of my bond with this town. As Deputy Chief, I will continue to work with and for our officers. The department's most important asset is our personnel, and I will work together with all our members to continue to develop our organization and best serve our citizens. Looking down the road, I see officer wellness and officer recruitment as two specific areas that we need to focus on as we progressively lay out our vision for the future of the department. I'm committed to strengthening our community connections as we rebound from COVID and restart our civic programs. There are many important conversations taking place around town, and I look forward to listening, learning, and building a town that is safe and inclusive for all citizens. I'll conclude with a quote, which reflects how I'm going to approach this role. Individually, we are one drop, but together, we are an ocean. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, and very well said. I believe Chief and Deputy Chief, we will be coming back to you later this evening as the board conducts interviews for police lieutenant candidates. At this point, our next agenda item is a continuation of a hearing on transfer station revenues and proposed fees. 2 weeks ago, our superintendent, Randy Sylvester, presented the board with a recommendation that to adjust and increase some of the fees relative to the transfer station. I would note that the majority of the fee increases relate to commercial usage at the transfer station, with some modest fee increases for residents for disposal of electronics and appliances, mostly to cover our costs. I also want to take this opportunity before I ask our town administrator for any correspondence the town's received, to also just note and welcome our assistant superintendent, Matt Cahill. Matt is on the call. Matt was on the call 2 weeks ago and has joined our Hingham team, and we welcome him and we look forward to his contributions. Tom, did the town receive any feedback from citizens regarding the proposed fees?
No, we did not.
Okay, I would just note for the record that I did receive one question, and I spoke to a resident today who understood the fee structure, understood why it was necessary, but did say this is not a great time to be increasing fees and costs for residents living in Hingham. So I would just offer that for my colleagues' consideration. Randy, I don't know if you've received any feedback or any questions regarding the fee structure.
I have not.
Okay. Joe, I'd open it up to you for questions or comments on the proposed fees.
I believe I asked Randy all of my tough questions at our prior meeting when we reviewed this. I think the analysis that was presented in terms of the recommended transfer station fees was thorough. His comparison to fee arrangements that are in place in other towns was very helpful. And we are all mindful not only of the burden on residents, but also the funding requirements that the town has, and that each department is doing its best to try to cover its costs. So I really don't have any questions. I was satisfied at the last meeting, and I'm prepared to move forward.
Thank you. Bill, questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor. Just three comments or 3 points. So I am in support of this policy change for 3 reasons. Number one, we need more revenue, and we need new revenue sources. Number 2, as Randy explained, this really puts our fee structure on par with other towns. I would note that our fee structure was very much below other towns. This brings it up. And third, I thought Randy did a really good job in looking at the burden of out-of-town individuals who use our landfill transfer station facility, and looking at the cost of what that burden is and making it more equitable and fair across the board. So for those 2 reasons, I'm looking forward to supporting it, and I thank Randy for the work he did in putting it together.
I would echo my colleagues' comments, and I would also mention, Randy, that today in speaking to a resident who had questions about the fee structure, it was very helpful to be able to refer to those other communities and to reference where Hingham stands relative to those other communities. It was a really thorough analysis, and while certainly we are mindful of the impact on fees, on residents, as my colleagues have said, the cost of doing business to operate the transfer station and that economic model has really changed quite a bit over the last 10 years. And I think this is measured, it is reasonable, and so I support it as well. Is there anyone in the public who has a question or wishes to make a comment with respect to the proposed fees for the transfer station? Seeing none, I would accept a motion.
Mary, before the motion, I'd like to ask Randy what he's proposing as the effective date for the change in fees.
I think May 1st would be reasonable.
And you think that would give you time to socialize it, get the word out, do whatever postings you need so that residents are not surprised when they show up and it turns out there are these fees?
I think there will be plenty of time for me to get signs up the transfer station and get that on the message board, which will be up there for 5 weeks beforehand.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Would one of you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the request of the Public Works Department to modify the transfer station fee schedule to add or increase the following fees effective, you said May 1st, Randy?
May 1st.
May 1st, 2021. Increase the commercial sticker fee for out-of-town users to $150 per year. Increase the construction and demolition bulky waste fee for commercial users to $320 per ton with a $45 minimum under 250 pounds. Add an appliance recycling fee of $15 per item. Add an electronics recycling fee of $15 per item. Add a furniture recycling minimum charge of $15, scale use only.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Randy, Matt, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the board's agenda for this evening, we have is the 2021 annual town meeting warrant article discussion. I would just note for the record that the board had originally scheduled that to be taking up Article D, report of the Personnel Board, and Article E, salary of town officers this evening. Both of those have been deferred until this coming Thursday when the board will be meeting. So the article before us tonight is Article Y. Article Y is an HMLP proposed transmission and substation project. This is the third time that the board has discussed this. After last week's meeting, I know that there was some follow-up that was going to happen. And Bill Ramsey, I know that you have been very involved in many of these conversations. I want to start out by saying thank you. While I am the liaison for utilities, I was a little bit overwhelmed this week with some of my other liaison responsibilities. So I really appreciate your jumping in and having my back on this. Bill, I think what might be helpful is if you could summarize for Joe and myself, as well as the audience, sort of the essence of some of the conversations that have occurred. I know the board has gotten a packet of materials that have been reviewed. And to the extent that you have thoughts about how to move forward, I think Joe and I would also appreciate hearing that.
Sure. So thank you for that, Mary. So I met with Paul and his team on Friday morning last week, and I wanted to start off by thanking them for their time and the work they put together. They did an excellent job putting together the presentation. And we broke it down really into two specific areas. First of all, I asked them to explain in detail the need for this new substation and the associated lines. And Paul and his team, proved to me by clear and convincing evidence that we need this new substation. The risk of one of the lines going down, what that could do to our community in terms of a power outage. Paul specifically spoke about cold weather and the difficulty of repairing lines in cold weather. He also mentioned the possibility of a train derailment taking down the line across, along the Greenbush Railway. And when he was talking about it, I'm like, oh, that will never happen. And I noticed on the news today that an orange line derailed. So yes, it definitely could happen. So I am very much convinced of the need for this substation, and I want to thank them for their presentation. For me, the jury is still out on the location. All right, so the second half of the meeting, we talked about location options, and through our discussion, which I thought was a good one, we looked at the possibility of one or two maybe potential private options away from what's currently being proposed. I'd also like to vet a little more in detail maybe extending a little bit more into the transfer station area, the DPW facility, to see if that's a possibility. And I don't think we're really at the point here yet where we can go to town meeting and say we need 60 million to put this station in this specific location. I feel pretty confident, and I want Paul and his team to know that you know, over the course of the duration of this project, they will have the full support of this board and hopefully our community in getting this done and helping them with it. But I'd personally still like to vet a couple of those locations a little more to see if one of those private locations would work, or maybe working with the DPW department to see if that's an option as well before we go to town meeting and ask the town for, you know, what's going to be close to a $60 million borrowing. So that's where I'm at with it. And I want to thank again Paul and his team for taking the time to meet with me on Friday.
Thank you, Bill. Joe, did you have any questions for Bill?
I did, Bill. So you and it's both for Bill as well as for Paul. You went over the need, and that was established, and the location in terms of, well, I think more work needs to be done. In my view, there's a third question, which is what are the costs and or benefits of delay? I'd like to understand better what risks the town faces if in fact we delay this. And on the flip side, what are the benefits? And I think I heard one of the benefits is we may have a more beneficial location. But if you could address, or someone else could address, the costs and benefits of a delay.
So, I mean, I'm going to ask Paul to give his thoughts on the risk of a delay. I am very convinced about this area. So in terms of using the time to better vet a location in this part of town, I think it would be economically important to HMLP. And he's told to me that that's the right sector of town, maybe to put it that way. But I'll let him give you a little more detail on the risk, as he is much more of an expert on this than I'll ever be.
Paul?
Sure, thanks.
Good evening. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mary, Joe, Bill, thanks for your kind words. So in terms of a benefit by delaying, there really isn't one. You know, at the risk of, you know, overstating or, you know, getting all hysterical, you know, there's nothing good will come out of waiting any more time. You know, some might say that, yeah, well, it's never happened. You know, what are the odds? Well, you know, I had a boss at NSTAR when I was trying to explain myself out of a jam saying, yeah, but Danny, what were the odds that that was going to happen? And I'll give you the sanitized version of that response. Pretty good, Paul, because it happened, didn't it? You know, so when is it going to happen? Will it happen? I don't know, but I do know that the implications of it happening are catastrophic. And I'm not overstating when I say that. If it happens in the wintertime, you know, at the last meeting, I talked about it happening. You know, we had a tree come over. I think it was on Lozelle Street a couple of weeks ago. If you think about it, we've had a number of 50-mile-an-hour gust windstorms in the last couple of weeks. We've had 4 of them, you know, and they've all been on overtime too, but you know, that notwithstanding. So, you know, the weather isn't getting any better around here in terms of putting this sort of thing off. You know, we continue to have storms that could cause this sort of a situation to happen. So to the question of what benefit is there in delaying, I don't see a benefit in delaying. In terms of moving it someplace else, you know, in the package that we have, you know, we outlined and laid out the costs associated, the additional costs associated with moving it further from Hobart Street. So it's clearly financially, there is no benefit to moving it down to Cushing Street, you know, another 20-something million dollars, moving it up to the industrial park, another $20 million, you know, moving it to the, around the shipyard area. We didn't even price that out because when you look at that, there are multiple water crossings, there are bridges, there are railroad crossings. So we just knew that that would be, a big ticket number. So we didn't even bother pricing that out. So in terms of delaying, I don't see any benefit to the ratepayers and the customers, the residents and businesses in Hingham by putting this off any longer. And in terms of financial benefits, clearly there is none. And if somebody says, well, how about here, we'll certainly do our due diligence, as I did, Bill, when you had suggested a spot, I spoke to that person, he's not interested in selling. If anybody else has suggestions where they think it might go somewhere in the vicinity of Hobart, yeah, absolutely, we'll chase it down, because I realize and I appreciate that there are people that live near here that don't want it to be there. I get that, and I'm not trying to be a pain or anything else like that. I'm trying to put it in a place that provides the most reliability for everybody in Hingham at the least possible cost. And that's what my responsibility is. That's why you hire me, to make these sorts of decisions. And that's what me and my team have done. We've done, I feel, an exhaustive search for reasons both of reliability and cost. We've centered, as Bill described it, in the Hobart Street sector. And, again, in the package, and as we have, I believe, demonstrated at various meetings, there aren't a lot of places around Hobart that, for either reasons of Article 97 and the problems with trying to turn Article 97 land into something to be used other than open space, that's all laid out in here. In terms of conservation and conservation issues in the area around Hobart, again, it's all laid out in here. You asked us to lay it out. I think we did. There's not a lot of places around Hobart that work as well as the spot that we've landed on.
If I can follow up,
Please.
is one of the purposes to connect a line coming in from Weymouth? Is that what's going to be happening here?
So, as I said at one of the earlier meetings, well, actually, I have spoken. I haven't spoken to the mayor yet, but I have an appointment scheduled to meet with him. Our plans have us connecting to an existing transmission line in Weymouth and making its way to, our Hingham landing spot.
So do we have a firm indication from Weymouth where they are going to be allowing the connection?
I do not.
So to me, that's an important aspect of the site assessment. We need to connect to a point, and if we're not sure where that point is, why is now the time to make our decision about the best location for this site?
So Joe, it's kind of a chicken and egg, right? What's going to come first, the start of the connection or the end of the connection? There is a process in Hingham for us to secure land in Hingham. That's town meeting. So that's where we started. There are not a lot of places around, Hingham proper for us to be able to tap into a transmission line, an existing transmission line, to bring it to our landing spot.
I guess I would not view this as a chicken and egg problem, because this is a situation that we are the recipient, and it's unambiguous. And so we need to be able to tap into the line coming in. And if we're not sure where that point is, I guess I don't understand how you are firm in your site selection decision.
And like I say, there are two companies around us that own transmission lines. Eversource, their lines are in Weymouth. National Grid's lines come in through Norwell and Situate. As I described at the last meeting, for us to even consider tapping the National Grid lines, we would have to pay to beef up the national grid transmission lines at the price of millions of dollars. So it makes the choice to me pretty easy that we need to tap the Eversource lines. The
Right.
closest town to us that has an Eversource transmission line in it is Weymouth.
Oh, I'm not disputing that, but I don't know where that connection point's going to be. And what I heard is you don't know that.
No, well, if I said that,
Oh,
I
okay,
misspoke. I didn't mean to say that.
okay.
What I think I said was, we have not had conversations with the mayor of Weymouth yet as to what street and what route we are going to take. We know where we want to tap that line, and we're in the process of negotiating an agreement with Eversource for that now.
Okay, got it. No other questions right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for all of the work that that has gone into advancing this warrant article for consideration. I think for me, I didn't know that this project even existed until 55 days ago, which was when the warrant articles were due into town hall. And I think I'm sort of where Bill is, which is I understand the need for this, and I appreciate that HMLP is being proactive in addressing reliability and capacity issues. At the same time, we as a board have a job to do. And as I think I said a few meetings ago, I think I need to be able to represent to town meeting if I'm asking for their permission, particularly as it relates to transferring an asset, namely town land, that I feel like it's the right decision for the town, and that we've gone through a process to understand that. To me, there are still a lot of unanswered questions in this. And I think that these questions are worth continuing to pursue, but I don't see myself in a position to recommend this for town meeting's approval at this time. But that doesn't mean to say that at a future date or a future town meeting that I wouldn't be supportive. I would add one other thing, and Joe, you asked about sort of cost, the cost and the benefit of a delay. To me, there's also a risk here, which is a risk that town meeting says no to this opportunity because they don't feel like they have the information, or that they feel like maybe there are some concerns that they have that we haven't had time to address. And I think it would be unfortunate for this project if it received a no vote at town meeting. I like to say that I think an important part with warrant articles is advancing them when they have the greatest likelihood of being successful. And while I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, it doesn't seem quite ready to me at this time. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is open it up to members of the audience. If anyone has a question or wishes to make a comment, if you could please, when recognized by the chair, if you could state your name and address for the record. And if you could please direct questions or comments to the chair, I would appreciate it. Some of you may have questions for HMLP, but again, if you could just route those through the chair, that helps our meeting process. I recognize Senior Chief Keith German.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I actually raise in support of this article, and I'd just like to make a statement that as a licensed electrician myself within the Commonwealth of Mass, I fully appreciate the gravity of the situation that the General Manager, Paul Henue, is, and in fact, recognize him also as the subject matter expert. And I appreciate his truth and his candor on this issue. And I believe it deserves non-experts, such as this board, to make a decision without haste. Because as anyone who watched TV recently saw great and vast outages in Texas, they should be greatly concerned on what could happen here with our infrastructure, meaning our electrical grid, and the conditions that happen afterwards if that grid was to go down. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize Mr. Robert Achille.
Good evening, Robert Achille, 194 Old Hobart Street. Thank you for allowing me the chance to bring my concerns forward. I just have a few comments and concerns for the board, if that's okay.
Please.
Back in January, I filed for an abatement on my property due to current landfill and current substation problems that I've had over the last couple of years. That was well before I knew anything about this project being proposed. On February 8th, officials from, I believe, the assessors department came out to my house. These individuals said, quote, this would be perfect if it wasn't for that. And they pointed towards the landfill and the current substation. And then they proceeded to say this would be a little nice private dead end street. With that being said, if the town assessors are agreeing with the current landfill and substation that negatively impacted my property value already, one could reasonably assume that a new substation even closer to my property is going to reduce the value of our homes even more. I was completely caught off guard by this project that I have not even addressed the issue with the assessor's office. I guess my question is, who is going to be responsible for the decrease in value to the abutters if this substation is placed where Mr. Henry wants to? Second, we had emailed the Board of Selectmen asking about the property at 58 French Street that's privately owned. I believe it was bought in 1992. Nothing's been done with it ever since. It's about 0.8 acres and it's close to the same size proposed piece of land you're looking at. Has anyone approached the owner to see if they're willing to sell that property? It seems like the ideal location. It's across the street from Sprito's construction pit, and it's right underneath the high tension lines that are already there. The light department a few years ago had tried to put 2 generators next to my property at the landfill. At that time, I reached out to the town liaison to the light department and explained that it's a residential neighborhood, and they agreed. The town then spoke to the light department and asked them to move the generators, which they did, up into the industrial park in South Hingham. My question is, how is this situation different from the previous one where it was deemed a residential neighborhood and not suitable for electrical equipment at that time? I think it would be beneficial to all those involved to have an on-site meeting of the actual property before any decisions are made to put this on town warrant. Google, topographical maps, and drive-bys do not adequately show the impact this project's going to have on the neighborhood. And lastly, I have grave concerns over emergency vehicles being able to access my home if there's a catastrophic failure or an explosion at the proposed site. My house is on a dead-end street with one way in and one way out. I am fearful that if anything happened, the fire department will not be able to access my house. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Achille, with respect to your questions, I think for me at least, these questions are one of the reasons why I think that we need to, that this board should not act to authorize the transfer of request that town meeting transfer the land. I think from my perspective, many of these questions have not been sufficiently socialized and discussed in a public venue. You know, with respect to alternate locations, I believe that some of those have been explored. My understanding from our first meeting is that the parcel is that area is zoned in a manner where this substation could be built as of right. I'm looking to our town administrator to just like Tom, nod your head or something if I'm remembering that right. I remember you kind of showed us a map at our first meeting.
Yeah, I believe that was right. Yeah, Emily was.
And I would also point out that whether this project goes forward now or at a future date, any sort of questions about assessed value and other things would be the subject of a lot of the permitting boards. Again, I can't answer these questions, but it again sort of says to me why perhaps this may not be ready for town meetings consideration. So I thank you for raising those questions. I recognize Mr. Joe Kelly.
Joe Kelly, 7 Independence Lane. Also a licensed electrician here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I just wanted to know, Madam Chair, does HMLP have a commitment from the utility provider that there will be infrastructure upgrades to the equipment on the utility side? Because this can potentially become, you know, a $50+ million light switch that has a tripped circuit breaker on the other end. And if we can't get the power to come in, then our $50 million light switch is really no good at that point.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Paul, is that a question you can answer?
I don't understand what he's asking.
Sure. Mr. Kelly, I have to admit, I think what you were asking is whether if the substation is built and the increased capacity comes in, whether the system has the ability to utilize that extra capacity. Is that what I think? Is that your question?
Does the utility provider that will be feeding the substation, are they going to make any infrastructure upgrades to make sure that if we build a substation, no matter what the location is, that we're still going to always be able to get power to it, because they in turn have upgraded their system to withhold the increased demand on HMLP's new substation?
Mary, I'm going to ask whomever to unmute Tom Converse.
Sure. Yeah, is he on perhaps Paul as Tom?
He is on as Tom, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, Michelle, if you could unmute Tom. Mr. Converse, welcome. And if you could please respond to Mr. Kelly's question, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Kelly, I'm a master electrician as well, so nice to talk to you. Yeah, the design of this, as Paul has outlined before, we have 2 circuits that could have a single point of failure, to your point, like that light switch. The transmission line we're looking to tap into is a totally separate line. And we're actually, part of the proposal would be to bifurcate it. So we actually create 2 lines. So we actually increase the reliability of the line we're tapping into. And the reason we're looking to put the ring bus in at that parcel is to be able to use this line to backstop the 2 lines that are coming in right now and refeed Hobart. So we have, it's like a 3-way switch. Simplistics. But we're doing more back in the supply side as well as in Hingham.
Thank you, Mr. Converse. Is there anyone else who has a question or wishes to make a comment before the board votes on Article Y? Paul, I'm going to go to you, and then I see another hand as well.
Sure.
Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So, a number of, well, the number is 3, but, between you and Bill and Joe, you've all commented on, the need to have additional feedback and so you didn't use the word socialization tonight, but it has been used in the past. And, as we described in the packet and have at each of the meetings, let's presume that town meeting approves this transfer of the land and the bonding. That's the start of hearings. There are going to be a year or 2 years worth of opportunities. Let me go back a little bit further. So we are intending to have open houses in Hingham prior to town meeting, whenever that's going to be. So there'll be an opportunity for folks to hear, the townwide Hingham, to hear us then. Presuming that town meeting authorizes the transfer and the bonding, that's just the start. Again, I know I'm a broken record, but of a couple of years worth of hearings being held by technical experts who will hold that's what they do for a living. They will hold our feet to the fire in terms of, did we pick the best spot, both for reliability and cost? So I just don't want anybody to lose sight of that fact that, presuming it happens the way we would like for it to at town meeting, they're all public hearings. And like I said, there's gonna be a couple of years worth of hearings to decide, did we pick the right place?
Yes, understand, and thank you for pointing that out. I'd recognize Mr. and Mrs. Reska. I believe Mr. Reska had his hand up. If whichever of you is speaking could introduce yourself with your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Philip Reska, 198 Hobart Street. And again, to the chair, appreciate that as you said, that this has been in public discourse for 55 days and certainly leaves a lot of questions. I noticed by looking at the previous Hingham minutes that this project started as a $12 to $18 million endeavor. And at the attachment we received yesterday, which again, we were told the abutters meeting back in February 25th that things hadn't been written down yet. So certainly appreciate that somehow the opportunity presented itself to provide us something yesterday. And as we try to unpack that and better understand it, maybe that'll help. But that included an attachment that put a projected cost at 54.8 million. So that's a pretty wide jump across, a couple of years. And again, it makes me question what's changed. So again, we were told in our Zoom meeting that it's been this way for 35 years. Certainly our experience in town is not one of a reliability risk from our electric power. We don't know what changed that now demands essentially the cost of a school, a 50-something million dollar investment. And then further, the site selection, we think, again, having received information yesterday in writing that we were told was not in writing back on February 25th, we're not sure that all the diligence is built into that, or that, as Mr. Hen, said, the socialization has occurred yet that would make this ready for a townwide decision. So certainly, appreciate that sentiment's being expressed by the board. And again, we've compared to Texas and to Hull, but I don't understand the quantitative information that helps us understand how is reliability rated and so forth. So again, not being professional in the field, I could see that NSTAR and Eversource provide their reliability reports to the state and so on, and they have an IEEE standard for measuring reliability, and they have problem circuits they identify and all that, and not seeing anything analogous to that, but really hearing anecdotes about, this could happen. And then physically living on Hobart Street and seeing the difference in the height and the structures that support the Hingham lines versus the Hull lines, and reading that the Hull lines are dated to the 1935 time period, perhaps. And again, they certainly look more frail and they run a longer distance. So I'm not sure we've been presented with the right comparisons to understand the reliability and the true need that justifies what we're buying. Again, the board had the chance to meet with the Hingham Light community, so maybe they were provided more information than what we received in the packet, and maybe that information's out there. And as you said, more discernment on this will help us. So
Sure.
I agree with the sentiment that this isn't ready for town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add two things. First of all, I think that some of the information that has been provided has really only been summarized and gathered over the past few days. And I actually want to thank HMLP and Paul and your team for doing that. I think that over the last few weeks, you and your team have tried to be very responsive to the questions that you're getting from the board and the community. And that 31-page document, I know took a lot of time. I would just say one other thing, I may respectfully disagree, Mr. Reska, a little bit, which is that I think that we also have to remember that, HMLP, I would hold them up as next to any utility that I've ever been a customer of or been working with. I think that HMLP, the quality of the service and the reliability speaks for itself. So as HMLP is saying, hey, we think we need to invest in reliability and we need to invest in capacity. I'm right there with you. I think HMLP are the experts on this. I think it's appropriate to sort of ask some questions to understand that better. I think for me, it's just it's a big decision for this board to make and to represent at this point. given the information we have. I saw that someone had their hand up. I don't know if they've taken it down. Mr. Achille, another question or comment?
I'm just back to what Mr. Henry said about, going to town meeting and trying to pass it for the land swap and the money. It seems like an awful lot of work if we don't even know what piece of, to put it through that whole process through the town meeting, and we don't even know what piece of land that's going to be used yet. So if I guess if it does go to town meeting and the warrant and that piece of land passes, they do all the legwork for that, and then all of a sudden something happens and they have to go back to town meeting again for another piece of land swap somewhere. So I guess that's my only concern. If they move too fast and try to do the land swap now, and it deems that it's not the right piece of land for them, it seems like a giant waste of time for, I guess, the board and like everyone in the town.
Sure, and Mr. Achille, just to sort of clarify for the article itself, it asks the town meeting to give the Board of Selectmen the authority, but does not require the board to authorize the transfer of the land. So I think
Okay.
I think part of what we're talking about here is that HMLP would like to move ahead so that if in 6 months from now or 7 months from now, it is determined that's the appropriate site, that authorization to effect the transfer is in place, and then it doesn't have to wait until the next town meeting. So I would just say for any land transfer or for some of our warrant articles, they seek to give a Board of Selectmen the authority, but there is no obligation. So I just want to kind of clarify that for people. Is there anyone else who has a comment or question with respect to Article Y? Paul, I didn't know if you or your team had anything to add.
Mary,
I
see
do, Mary.
Natalie
There's
and Jack.
somebody else that has their, Natalie and Jack. I think it's Whittemore have their hand up. They had their up before me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Whittemore?
Here we go.
It's Natalie Whittemore, 200 Old Hobart Street. Thank you for taking my question. I guess maybe more of a thought. After looking through the documentation that Mr. Hino had sent, I didn't see really documentation of other sites that were actually looked at. For example, like reconfiguring the current transfer station, any kind of real fact and study that went on there. And also Article 97, I did read through what you had put about that, but it does say that a determination can be made with exceptional circumstances. And I certainly feel that this would qualify as one of them. When you talk about, six family homes that really will be very adversely affected if this goes forward. And I just would really like to see, you keep talking about like going to Cushing Street or other venues that would cost a little more. Well, I think the cost to all of us has to be factored in as maybe a potential reason why you may look at some other sites. And thank you. I'm going to just hope that you will, as you keep saying that you're going to do, it really look solidly at some other sites and come back to us with costs, real costs, so that we can feel that our concerns are being considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, anything else to add?
If I might, Mary. So, the board has said repeatedly that, you're convinced of the need. So I'm glad that we've convinced you of that. But it appears to us that, you're substituting the judgment and expertise of our consultants and experts who have said that this is the best place for it. And it appears that the board is comfortable with the risk of pushing this out further. And HMLP management, we are not comfortable with, continuing to exist, being fed the way that we are. So I guess that's the last thing I have to say.
I understand. Joe Fisher,
Yes.
something to add?
Yeah, a question, because what I've heard from Paul is that if this passes, there will be extensive hearings
Correct.
to address a number of issues. And what I am wondering is if there is any action that can be taken to initiate the process of moving forward other than a vote to transfer the land. So for example, in other projects, the town votes to proceed with a feasibility study, or they proceed in a number of different ways. And then at the very end, after the assessments have been done, there's a town meeting vote on ultimate construction or whatever the project is. Here, it looks like we're being asked to give the ultimate decision prior to the numerous hearings that are being held. But I don't think this board should hold up the commencement of the process. I think Paul's described it as an extensive process. So my question is there anything that we can do to commence that process other than actually agreeing to transfer the land?
Actually, Joe, one of the things that we talked about, both verbally and in the documents, is that, HMLP would certainly be amenable to not taking control of the property of this parcel until after all the permits have happened. So we would have, internal to Hingham discussions, open house type things. Town meeting happens, and the vote that would be taken would be such that we would not take control of the parcel until such time as all the various regulators say that's the right spot. So that's the kind of conditioning, if you will. I mean, frankly, I thought you were putting it right in my wheelhouse when you asked that question, because that would give the folks, the abutters, and everybody else in town the warm and fuzzy that we don't get this until the regulators are satisfied that we have done our due diligence and that this is the best spot for this project to be.
So if there's no transfer until a later date, is there a reason the town meeting needs to vote at the upcoming town meeting for that transfer? Or can there be a different vote to be followed by a second vote dealing with the transfer?
So we can't apply to, the regulators till we have the land available to us.
So,
And Joe, I think last week we asked Tom about potentially exploring that possibility with John Coughlin and Bill. Bill, I don't know if that was a hand or if you were, yeah, Bill, jump in here, please.
Thank you. So I would echo Joe's sentiment that you maybe use some time to engage in a feasibility study. And I mean, you're right about the process, right? You're going to have to go through your site board, which is the state agency that's going to regulate the state regulation parts of it, and that sounds like it's kind of a heavy lift. You're going to need a special permit A1 from the zoning board. You're going to require site plan review from planning. So yeah, there's a lot of steps here that you're going to need to go through. And I did have a very brief conversation with town real estate council, and I said to her, well, hypothetically speaking, can they go through the permitting process without the transfer? And she told me you could not. So you're right there. I see a lot of benefit to a feasibility study. And I look at, the momentum and the work that we put into our public safety facility that's still, in motion here. And I think it would really give you an opportunity to lock in. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not against the area, I'm against the specific site. So that Hobart area, I think you have convinced me that you need this there for a lot of different reasons we talked about. This specific parcel is of a little concern to me. I just don't think, I think you need to really vet those private options a little more. You need to look at whether or not the DPW facility could accommodate this. And while you were doing that, I think it would also mitigate a lot of the abutters' concerns. And meanwhile, as you're going through this study, Paul, you can work the other piece that you mentioned with a neighboring town. So I think you could use some time here to line this up and to come back and say, yeah, we are convinced of this specific location. We have worked that other issue. And I know, I do know that you're still going to have to go through zoning, go through planning, go through your site board. But I think there's a lot of merit to what Joe is saying about use this time to lock it, initiate a feasibility study and lock in a specific parcel with neighborhood concerns, so you can be ready to go. I think if we go to town meeting and we say we need to borrow $60 million, a lot of people, there's going to be a lot of pushback about the vetting process, and that's all I have.
Bill,
Yeah, I'd agree.
If I can just follow up with you, Bill, has the town looked at possible use of eminent domain as in the site selection process?
So, I did have a very brief conversation with the real estate council just to confirm, what I thought would be required from our permitting board, Joe. And I did not speak to her about eminent domain, but that's another option that could be utilized here, given the public benefit.
Right. So in other words, there's no reason that we necessarily have to limit the options to volitional sales, if in fact there's a property that may be even better and that would have a lesser impact on the community. So I don't know to what extent that's been looked at.
Yeah. So we've been talking about this for about an hour, and I am mindful that we have some other important business that needs to be conducted this evening. And I would just observe that this is a very helpful and good conversation. I worry that this is the kind of conversation that's going to happen on the floor of town meeting if this article advances this year. And I think that that's probably not the best place to have this important conversation. I kind of feel like if we were having this conversation 6 months ago, we could potentially be in a place where we're ready for town meeting, but we're at a place where we have to kind of make some decisions. I think at this point, I would accept a motion from either of my colleagues.
Joe, do you want to make it?
Or I'm prepared to make a motion.
I'll make it. I would, let me just pull up the vote sheet. So I would make a motion of no action on Article Y.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Mary? Aye. Paul, we are committed to continuing to work with you and your team to potentially bring this back for town meetings consideration next year.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who joined the hearing this evening. The next item of business on our agenda is actually the interview of 3 candidates for police lieutenant positions. And I just want to start, first of all, by thanking those of you who are joining this evening. And I would just also observe that a job interview is always kind of a nerve-wracking thing. Having to engage in a job interview in a public meeting process, even more so. So I want to start out by welcoming and thanking Sergeant Dearth, Sergeant Marquardt, and Sergeant Smith for not only applying for these positions, but also engaging in this interview. For members of the public, you are welcome to observe and listen to these interviews and offer the board feedback upon the conclusion of the interviews in writing to our office. But the way this will work is that Chief Jones will introduce each candidate. Each candidate will have an opportunity to make an opening statement. Members of the board will ask questions of the candidate. And then we will give each candidate an opportunity to make any sort of a closing statement. So that, and I would envision that each of these interviews would last between sort of 20 or 30 minutes. So we're not going to keep these gentlemen in the hot seat all night. Again, this is an important part of our job. And Chief Jones, I think at this point, I'd like to maybe turn it over to you to introduce our first candidate this evening.
Great, thank you very much, Mary. So first up, we have Sergeant Stephen Dearth, who should be on another screen coming up right now.
Yes. Good evening, Sergeant Dearth. Welcome. You're usually the man behind the camera, so tonight you're in front of the camera. And welcome. As you heard, we would like to begin by inviting you to introduce yourself to the board and to the community, if you could, please.
Certainly. Well, so first I'd like to thank Chair Power, Mr. Ramsey, and Mr. Fisher for their time and for the interview. It is an important part of the position, as you said. I mean, we're serving the public, so it's good that the public gets to meet us in this format. So you would like me to start by introducing myself briefly?
Please.
So certainly. So as the chief said, my name is Stephen Dearth. I'm a sergeant with the Hingham Police currently, and I've been here with the Hingham Police for 28 years. 13 of those as a sergeant. Prior to becoming with the Hingham Police, I worked 4 years for the Abington Police Department as a special volunteer police officer. Then I served 1 year as a seasonal police officer in Hull, the Hull Police Department. I'm married. I've been married for just about 26 years. I have 2 children. I graduated from high school. I'll freely admit it was class of 1986, just a few years ago. So after college, I went to Massasoit Community College after high school, and then I went to the workforce. At the time, I wanted to be a police officer since I was 5 years old. At the time, they weren't hiring. I was number 2 on the Hingham list. They weren't hiring. There was no funding. This was the early 90s. There was no funding to hire police officers. I tried New Hampshire. I tried everywhere. They weren't hiring. I found out Florida had a program where you can self-sponsor yourself, put yourself to the police academy. I applied on via the mail. I went down there several times, tested. I got in as a self-sponsored applicant, which meant I had no obligation and no one had an obligation to hire me. I would just graduate and become certified to be a police officer in Florida. I did that, and I came back here, and during the time I was gone, Massachusetts changed the law that they would accept out-of-state academies. Prior to that, they would never accept. You had to, even if you're a police officer in another state, you had to do the full police academy. While I was gone, unbeknownst to me, they changed the law, so they would accept my certification in another state and give me a waiver on the police academy. I came back and I made an appointment with the police chief, who I'd never met before, explained my situation, and they had a need, but they didn't have any funding for an academy. So ultimately, I was eventually hired here. That was 1993. So I served as a patrolman. During that time, I served as a traffic officer. I did that for 8 years. So, and then I became a field training officer. Did that for just about 7 years. And that's, to me, is one of the most important jobs we have here. That's the opportunity to mentor, to mold, and to really guide a new officer as they begin their career. That's a really important position. I really take pride in that. I was eventually promoted to sergeant, and I was a patrol sergeant for about 1.5 years. The lieutenant on the shift, he was out on a leave. So for about 1.5 years, I was the acting lieutenant, if you would, not by grade, but by job performance. So I ran the shift as a lieutenant. And it's always challenging when you become a new supervisor. You have, I was on 15 years when I was promoted, and you're immediately the next day supervising veteran officers who were here for 30, 35 years. And it's a challenge, and it's something you learn and you grow with and you develop. Eventually, after several years as a patrol sergeant, I was assigned as a traffic sergeant. And that gave me a great opportunity to kind of expand my horizons. Part of that job is you represent the chief of police on the traffic committee. So I did that. You have monthly meetings. You supervise a traffic division, which at the time was 9 officers. You get feedback from the public. You monitor crash locations, assign enforcement education areas. So that was a great experience. And then just 5.5 years ago, I got the opportunity to be the court prosecutor, which is not every part of the state has that. Basically, I'm the liaison between the police and the court. So I represent the police department in minor misdemeanor cases, and I'm the liaison between the district attorney's office as well. That's a great experience and another opportunity to learn and grow. I was also given the opportunity, I applied in 2011 to become the public information officer. So I was just the second one. Chief Perino was the first public information officer we had. And that job is what I consider an honor to serve. I represent the police department. I have that opportunity, and it's an honor to do that. I manage the social media, the website, press conferences, give statements, and I represent and speak on behalf of the chief of police and the department itself. So, as I said, I was a sergeant for 13 years, and I never actively sought out becoming a lieutenant. I felt I wanted to grow more in that position, learn, expand my horizons, gain more experience, and I thought I was really developing my supervisory experience in different ways. Not to mention, I felt I was contributing to the department. So now I'm fully ready to move up to the next administration level as a lieutenant and go to the next challenge.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over. We're going to kind of rotate these questions. We will lead off with Joe Fisher.
Certainly.
Yes, well, good to see you. I wanted to pick up on the comment you made about your efforts and your actions in mentoring people. Can you give us and share with us a specific example of how you helped coach or mentor someone, and what improvements did you see in that person's either knowledge or skill as a result of your coaching or mentoring?
Surely, Mr. Fisher. So becoming an officer is a whole change of life. It's a lot different when you apply what you learned in the academy to the street. It's an eye-opening experience, and it's different doing it than it is learning it. So, for instance, one specific thing was an officer making an OUI, operating under the influence, or a drunk driving arrest. And that takes practice and skills and experience. And the first time is nervous. Of course, the officer's nervous. And so I got to work with officers during field training, and you give guidance. First, they see you make the arrest, and then eventually they move to the stage where they're able to do that on their own. Once they've seen someone involved in some. So I was able to specifically mentor one officer that's specific on how they're reporting, what they do, how to improve. And I would see their reports become better and see how with their dash cams, I see their videotapes and see how they improve their own skills. And then after they become on their own, they graduate the field training program, they're on their own, I was still able to see the reports, and they would come to me sometimes and ask for feedback and say, this is what we talked about a year ago. This looks pretty good. And you'd say, that's great. You really come a long way. So that's one way to mentor, just specifically in that instance.
Great. I'll do one more question and then yield the floor. What do you see as the most challenging aspect of the current working environment at the Hingham Police Department? And what steps have you taken or would you propose to take to meet those challenges?
So one challenge is going to be recruitment officers. Getting new officers nationwide, we're included in that. Getting officers, getting candidates to want to become police officers. Every year, the amount of people that apply to become police officers shrinks. The candidate pool shrinks. And with the current climate, it's becoming even more, shrinking even more. So you have police departments all across the country that never had to have a huge budget for police recruitment. Now they've had to, because they have to compete for small candidate pool for every other agency. So one way that we are moving towards that is showing what we do, showing how we serve, showing the opportunities you have here at the Hingham Police, that you can make a difference, the way you can participate in, what opportunities and specialty positions that you have. So one of those ways is to show that through, specifically in social media, to show that, look, we do good things. This is a proud job. This is a great job to have, and you really contribute to your community.
Thank you.
That's just moving forward too.
Bill Ramsey, question for
Sergeant Dearth, good to see you. Sergeant Dearth, I want to note that I had the pleasure of working with you on the Traffic Safety Committee for many years. And I thought you did a wonderful job there, and I want to commend you on the great work you've done as the police prosecutor and the PIO.
Thank you, sir.
So my question to you, Sergeant Dearth, is, as you currently know, we are in the midst of a national conversation about police reform. State legislature recently passed a major police reform bill. How do you see law enforcement changing over the next 5 years?
Drastically. So change always comes in any field, but in police field specifically, it's changed in my career. It's changed several times in my career. This is unprecedented as far as in my memory. I'm certainly going back, if you were a police officer in the 60s, I'm sure that was dramatic, and that probably is more so or equal to. But this is in recent memory, this is a dramatic change. And change needs to happen in any career field, any profession. So the fact that the public needs us to have faith in us and have trust in us again, so we can certainly work towards that. And now with the state legislature mandating that reform, we're even going to work to that better. So one of the parts of the reform is creating this post, which is a police officer standards and training commission. Basically, we've never had this. 48 other states have this program. And it's basically certification. Like if you become a nurse, you need to take a board. You become a lawyer, not the same level, but if you need to take the bar exam to pass that. You can do great in college, great in the police academy, but if you don't pass that certificate, then you don't become in this case, a police officer. So we don't have that. We're going to have that now. And that's going to be a way to track if one officer leaves here or leaves an agency in Massachusetts or any other state and under cloudy circumstances resigns before an investigation and they try to get hired somewhere else, it's going to track that. So you're not going to get someone else's bad apple or bad luggage in your agency. And it's going to prevent it from going somewhere else too. So that's going to create us a more professional and work towards us becoming more professional and recognizes as a more professional organization and industry, if you would. So, but the reform certainly is it's a change for us, but part of that change needs to happen. The reform did happen quickly without as much input as we would have preferred as a police department, as a police organization, a police field. But either way, it's here, and this is what we have to adapt to. So it's going to cover use of force. It covers a lot of areas. I'm sorry, Mr. Ramsey, did you want me to explain how part of the law as I understand it, or part of how it's going to affect us?
How it's going to affect you, and you don't need to go into too much detail, looking for some just general feedback.
Okay, so it's going to create that commission. It's going to oversee what we do. When we use use of force, it's going to require that we automatically file a report on use of force. But also it's going to be reviewed now by this agency to see if, an independent review, if you would, to see if it was justified. When we do in a protest such, this is specifically spelled out, when we have a protest, it requires us now to seek out a protest organizer and create a liaison or an officer in charge from the police department to that protest organizer, so they can have that connection before. So if there's any issues during the protest, they can have that communication. We already do that here. We've already, when we have a protest, we have an officer assigned, a supervisor, to be that officer in charge. So we've already done that. It's just going to formalize that. It's also going to spell out during protests what specifically use of force levels we can use. And if we haven't exhausted other options, we have to file reports of what force we use, whether it's a canine, whether it's a tear gas, rubber bullets, and that has to be justified, and it will be justified and examined by this state commission. So it just gives that checks and balances that will help the public to get have some more faith and credibility in us.
And my second question to you, Sergeant Dearth, is as a lieutenant, you'll now be in a position of very high leadership within the department. If Chief Jones asked you to come to his office to speak with him and said to you, I'd like you to give me some very candid feedback. Tell me two things operationally that the HPD does well, and we should continue to do those things. And give me two things that we need to improve upon. And how do we improve those areas? What would you tell them?
So the first part, what we do very well is training. The last several administrations here have really pushed us towards training, once again, to make us more professional and more effective. So we they put a lot of funds into that, into a training budget. They encourage officers and staff here to train the trainers so that they can come back and bring training. We're constantly training. Understandably, last year, a lot of that training has been limited because of COVID. We still train online, we still do limited in-person training, but that's nationwide that training has been limited. So we do training well. One of the things that we we could improve on, candidly, we do need to diversify our police department. And that is somewhat hard to do because the applicant pool is limited and less, but we need to diversify the police department more. Another thing that we could certainly improve upon is our retention. We want to keep people here longer, especially now with new generations. Sometimes employees tend not to stay as long. They tend to leave, whether it's loyalty, whether it's just somewhere else looks better. So we need to make this place, meaning our organization, so good that they don't want to leave. So they tell their friends, you need to transfer into us, so that we can keep the best staff that we have and just continue to make it a great place to work.
Thank you. Sergeant, welcome. And I just want to also commend you on the professionalism of the packet that you provided to the board, introducing yourself, your application, letters of commendation, etc. It was really very, very well done.
Thank you, Chair Power.
I'd like you to think about, in your career, I wondered if you could please describe a situation, an emergency situation where you were playing a leadership role. And I wondered if you could please describe the situation, describe the role that you played, and what you learned from it.
So recent situation, leaving out specific details, of course, recent situation where a domestic situation occurred. A family member called, they'd been assaulted with a weapon in their home. And the person also had the person who assaulted them, the family member had a gun visible on their body at the time in the house. So immediately that the victim luckily fled the house and called. So now we know the person is alone in the house. So now we have a person in the home that can't harm anyone but themselves. So I was at the time I was assigned to the station. I had a prisoner that I was in charge. I was a shift commander. In other words, in our organization, the shift commander, when he or she is off, the sergeant moves up to that position. So that's what the position I was in. So with a prisoner in the station, I can't leave. Somebody has to be here with them, obviously. So when this happened, I tried to speak to the immediately officers under the command of a supervisor who's a patrolman, moving the step up as an acting patrol supervisor. That person on the ground is the supervisor, moving the units to the house. Immediately we evacuate, we surround the house, evacuate the neighbors. So now we just have a person in the home that needs to be addressed, obviously needs to be arrested, made safe. But there's no hurry on that. We can stay here all night if we have to. So I contacted the supervisor out on the patrol supervisor, and I needed to have a patrolman come back here to stay with the prisoner. Regretfully, it happened to be a new patrolman who could use the experience of being at a scene like that and doing that. However, I made the judgment that I needed to get that person back here. He was the best position to get back here. So we got back to the station, and then we have protocols that we follow, activation of some additional resources. I managed to get a hold of him on the phone from the police station, trying to get a dialogue that wasn't successful, to have him come out so we could just talk to him and then take him into custody or to the hospital, whatever needed to be, but and render those weapons safe. That wasn't successful. So I once I had someone at the station, I went to the scene there, and I assumed the incident command there. And then at that point, we have negotiators come, SWAT team, we have some neighboring police departments. And then at that point, the deputy chief came, who at that point, I believe he took over as incident commander, and I commanded the shift and assisted at the scene. So luckily, after about 2 or 3 hours of negotiations, the hostage negotiators got him to come out, and he was taken under arrest without incident, without any harm. Weapon obviously was found in the home. So that was an incident type of that where that was just last year that happened.
Thank you. And The next question I'd like to ask you as, in your opinion, what are a couple of your strengths that you think make you the right candidate for this position today?
So a couple of my strengths that that will help me help me do my job now, that will help make me successful as a lieutenant. I have a positive attitude, and it's genuine. You know, we have bad days, we have bad incidents as part of this job, but you learn from them and you try to focus on the positive. So the fact that I have a positive attitude, positivity, we all know, breeds positivity. So when the supervisor has positive attitude and a positive outlook, that's contagious. And so I have that. I have also integrity. I take pride whenever I wear that uniform. I represent the Hingham Police, the police profession, and the town of Hingham. So the way I work when I work is I always, and I tell this to the field when I was a field training officer, that the way I work is if my wife or my children were invisible beside me during my shift, would they be proud of what I did, the way I acted, the way I treated people? Obviously, sometimes you get dirty, you have a job to do, you know, and you use force. But as long as I was reasonable and it was required and I treated them fairly and respectfully, so would they be proud of me? That's what I ask myself on the ride home when I go home. Would they be proud of what I did? So that's how I act. So I have integrity. And then I have experience that would help bring, this job has a lot of experience. I mean, policing is experience. That's how we become, but we need experience. We need police officers need to get experience. So I bring as a supervisory role, I bring experience in that. As I said, 13 years as a supervisor. Before that, as a field training officer. And so I bring that varied experience to the role of a lieutenant. I would bring that.
Thank you. I think we've probably got time for one more question from each member of the board. Joe, an additional question for Sergeant Dearth? Oh, Joe, I think you have to unmute.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Could you share an experience you had in dealing with someone that you found to be very difficult and how you handled that situation?
Mr. Fisher, did you mean a citizen or an employee?
I'll leave that to you.
Okay. With a citizen, I find when you treat people with respect, 95% of the time that comes back. There's always going to be people that you don't treat, that aren't going to be respectful. I had an issue related back to an incident with drunk driving. Stopped the car for drunk driving. Man was heavily intoxicated. Placed him under arrest, and he was not cooperative at all. Very difficult. Not so much assaulting me, but very uncooperative. Very is sometimes someone who's on influence could be. I continue just to treat him professional. This is not personal. I understand it's personal for him. He's arrested, but it's not. He's not personally attacking Steve Dearth. He's attacking an officer, someone in the uniform. Continue to treat him respectful. We do the booking, and he tells us he's an attorney, and that has no bearing on the incident. But when he called his wife, he called his wife to pick him up to get bailed out, and he looked at me, and now he had calmed down a lot, and he said that was the hardest phone call that I had to make. I saw him later at trial. After the trial was over, he came up to me and he just thanked me for my professionalism, and he apologized for his demeanor. And I just reminded him, do you remember what you said to me that night on the phone? You said that was the hardest phone call you had to make. He said, yes. And I said, at least you were able to make that phone call. At least we didn't have an officer come to your wife's door to tell her that you had died. So I wasn't trying to lecture him. I was just trying to show that, maybe leave with that thought. So by rising above and staying professional, and I'm human, but rising above and staying professional, that's one of the ways that I overcame that.
Sergeant Dearth, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Bill, another question?
Thank you, Sergeant Dearth. We're having a lot of discussions about the budget last couple months here. And one of the requests in the HPD budget is for a social worker. And as a lieutenant and the officer in charge of a shift, can you describe to us how you would utilize a social worker to help de-escalate cases involving domestic violence, cases involving individuals suffering from mental health issues, and individuals struggling with substance disorders?
Certainly, Mr. Ramsey. So we already had a program in place. We as the department applied for a grant, and we were given a federal grant between the Weymouth Police and the Hingham Police to have a social worker on staff here, part-time basis. But we had her for I think a year or two. We were very, very fortunate to have her. So while she wasn't always here, she was on call, not all the time. But we would do a lot of follow-up with her. We'd go to a case like that we maybe didn't rise to the level of a domestic situation or that rose to an arrest, but there was some help that they needed there, some intervention. So we would refer the case to the social worker, who was obviously under confidentiality rules. She would reach out and try to contact them and provide them with some resources. That's very helpful also with people under the influence of drugs, alcohol, and having mental health breakdowns and issues. So as the board, I'm sure, is well aware, as the police commissioners, mental health and domestic violence by law aren't in the police log, if you would. Those calls aren't public for obvious reasons. But that's a lot of what we do here. We have a lot of those calls, and that's a lot of what we tie our time with. And so a lot of those calls, we will try to, with the social worker, we would respond to the scene. Number one priority is safety of everybody, safety of the person involved, anyone else, bystanders, and the police officer. So once the scene is safe, if it was feasible, we would have an officer bring the social worker to the scene. And that worked many times. Other times it was more of a follow-up basis. So unless we had a social worker here all the time, which is impossible to have one 24 hours a day, he or she wouldn't respond to the scenes directly. But so we're already ahead of that as far as having that. And we do have a lot of training in mental health crisis intervention. Many of us have been trained in basic crisis intervention and de-escalation. So we've continued to train in that. We're only going to train in that more as well. So having a social worker fulfills a good need. However, as police officers, we know when we need to use that. Sometimes the scene has to be safe. People have to go to the medical hospital or be arrested when the crime occurs under the law. But social worker does a lot behind the scenes, a lot of follow-up, and it's been a great resource for us.
Thank you. Sergeant, the final question before we give you an opportunity to, make any closing comments. Over the past year, there's also been a lot of discussion about social justice, and here in Hingham, we've established a unity council, and this board and Chief Jones have been very involved in a number of things. And one of the things that's come out from a lot of the Unity Council work is that there are members of our community, whether it's individuals who identify as a person of color or members of the LGBTQ plus community, who feel either marginalized or unsafe in our community. And, as I think about lieutenants in the Hingham Police Department, you're a leader within the police department. And my question is, what can the Hingham Police Department do to help marginalized members of our community feel safer within our community?
Well, one of them, as you said, Chair Power is to have the chief involved and have discussions. Discussions are a good thing. They can be hard for us to hear, hard for other people to hear. But numbers and facts and impressions and feelings, that's all part of the discussion. So one of the ways we can do it is by transparency. When we get back over past this COVID hump, which hopefully later this fall or somewhat more back to normal, or even sooner, hopefully, our Citizens Police Academy is one great way that we invite everybody. If you live in town, if you're a resident or you work in town, or exceptions can be made if you have a connection to the town, you used to live here, things like that. You come to the police station, you see what we do, you meet officers, you get to ask questions. You really, every week is a different topic. You do a ride along. You'll see that we're human, that, police officers, what we actually do out there. So that's one way, just one way through our community policing efforts to get more involved. We have much more events that we used to do with community before COVID for community policing, family fun day, movie nights out behind the police station. All these are public and they're free and they're open. So those things can invite everybody. And if people feel that they can come there, they can see us, they can talk to us, have a discussion. Just talk to us. We'll talk back, and then we'll maybe learn, and we'll see that we're both humans, but where we are. And but it's all about communication.
Thank you. At this point, I think we would just turn it over to you for any closing remarks that you would like to make.
Just very briefly to the board and to any of the public. So I'm proud in my position as a police officer here. I'm ready to move to the next level of the administration level of the position of lieutenant. I'm very confident that I can do the job and I can grow and learn and continue to learn. I think we're in a good position here as a department and as a town. As the board and public knows, we have a new chief, we have a new deputy chief. They all came from within, so they're here. They have new ideas. We're really moving forward, and as these interviews here, we're getting a new command staff. We're replacing people. I think we've hired 7 officers in the last year. We're evolving, we're changing, and it will always do that. Police departments will always do that. And I'm proud to be part of that change and go along with the change and move forward. And I take pride in mentoring. If I'm promoted to lieutenant, you're in charge of your sergeant and the patrol officers on your shift. And you're a unit, you work together. Part of my job is to hold them accountable as a sergeant, to hold them accountable to also let them grow and learn and improve on their skills. And so as a lieutenant, the way I would treat the officers, the shift, and the public is lead by example. So they see that this is the way we talk to people. When someone comes to the front lobby, for instance, when I'm at the front desk filling in as a lieutenant, when someone comes to the front lobby, I say, "Can I help you?" Like that. They're coming in here for something. They're not coming in just to say hi. Sometimes they do, but they're coming in here. So we're giving them a service. We work for the public. When they come in here, I say, "Can I help you?" "Hi, can I help you?" And maybe sometimes give a little smile if I can, just to put them at ease if you can see they're upset. So that attitude and demeanor, I fully believe will, not that it isn't already, but that will cement itself and trickle down. So, it's the whole team that you work with will see that you lead by example, and this is what's expected of you. And it's an exciting time, and I hope I'm selected to be part of this change and this moving forward. Not that there's nothing wrong with any of the other past chiefs. We've had several chiefs, each of them bring their own ideas, but this is a time where we have a new chief as well.
Thank you. Sergeant, we are so proud of your accomplishments, and we are so grateful for you placing yourself in consideration for this very important role. It's really been a pleasure to visit with you tonight. I think that it's been very helpful to learn a little bit more about you and how you would approach the role if the position were made available. So again, thank you for joining us this evening, and have a good night.
Thank you. I appreciate the time, and thank you again to the board. Thank you very much.
Chief Jones, would you like to introduce our next candidate?
Certainly. We have next up is Sergeant John Marquardt, and it might just be 1 second while they're switching the hot seat there.
Okay. And while they're switching the hot seat, Bill, I'm going to put you in the hot seat for answering questions first.
All right.
So we'll kind of rotate this around.
Ready.
Good evening.
Good evening, Sergeant Marquardt. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I believe Chief Jones has probably told you kind of the process for this evening. We are going to invite you to make some opening comments to introduce yourself to the board and the community. Then we will take turns asking you a series of questions. And then at the conclusion, we will also then give you an opportunity to make any closing comments or ask any questions of us. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. First off, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and sit in front of you again. My name is John Marquardt. I've been with the Hingham Police Department. This is my 11th year. My career started over 15 years ago. Back in 2005, I was hired to work for the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department at the Nashua Street Jail. I worked there for a period of time, left my employment there. I took a campus police officer job at LaSalle College in Newton, Mass. So I worked there for 3 years as a campus police officer. During that time, I went to a police academy, graduated from that. I also joined the Army National Guard during that time frame as a cavalry scout, and did my time in the National Guard with them. At the end of 2009, I was hired by my hometown department, Abington, as a full-time police officer. I went through the police academy for them, another one, and I once I graduated there, I did an FTO program, and we found out with my classmate Nick Smith, who you'll meet in a few minutes, we found out that they weren't going to be able to keep us due to budgetary constraints. So we were afforded the opportunity, and Hingham was gracious enough to take us, and we laterally transferred over here back in July of 2010. So my career in Hingham started then. It was very brief. In the beginning of 2011, I received orders to deploy to Afghanistan. So I had a short break in service from about March of 2011 till May of 2012. And when I deployed overseas to Afghanistan. Once I came back, I worked in patrol for a short time, and then I was given the position of school safety officer. So I worked as a safety officer and helped get that program started back up. After my time as the school safety officer, I was appointed to the position of detective, where I served for a number of years up until I was promoted to sergeant, where I currently am now. Few of my roles that I have now for the PD is I'm a firearms instructor, a less lethal weapon instructor, a taser instructor. I also do a number of the community programs. I coordinate a number of the community programs of the department. Our RAD women's self-defense, RAD kids self-defense, and our RAD seniors self-defense. I assist continually with the Citizens Police Academy and the Citizens Police Alumni Group, which I help direct. And I work with the Citizens Police Academy up at Linden Ponds, doing a number of classes on fraud, victim safety, things like that. In addition to that, I also oversee our school resource officers and work with them on a continual basis to try to help meet their needs, make their job easier for them, and continue to make sure we have that great connection with our schools. I'm also our department's civil rights officer. I recently took over those duties from another officer, so I've been working with that and kind of jump head first, especially in the current climate that we find ourselves in. So, and I'm currently the day shift supervisor, where I supervise upwards of 7 to 11 officers, depending on a daily basis. So it's very rewarding for me. Additionally, I also serve as a adjunct faculty member at Quincy College. I teach in the criminal justice department, night classes and some traditional undergrad classes during the day when I have the time. I also serve as a police academy instructor, teaching conflict resolution, crisis negotiation, and suicide prevention. So I have some things outside that I'm passionate about as well, in addition to the duties I do here. Very fortunate, been given a lot since I've been here. I've tried to help everybody out and pay it forward and pay it back along the way, and work with all my colleagues. I'm married. I have 2 kids. And I come from a family of police officers. My father was a Boston police officer for 41 years. My brother is a police officer in the town of Abington. He's been there for 28 years. Very, very blue collar family, very service oriented nurses, workers, firefighters, one firefighter. Just a very, very family that focused on, selfless service and sacrifice. It's how I was raised. So fortunate to be here, fortunate to, stand in front of you or sit in front of you now to be able to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to lead off with Bill Ramsey. Bill, questions for Sergeant Marquardt?
So Sergeant Marquardt, let me first just thank you for your service in our police department, which has been exemplary. I also want to note your exemplary military service, particularly your combat service, and being a Purple Heart recipient. I was very, very impressed by that, and thank you for your service. So my first question for you is, we are having a national discussion about police reform. Our legislature just recently passed a major police reform bill. As a lieutenant, how do you see law enforcement changing over the next 5 years?
Sure. So it's a really good question. So it's a big part. There's a number of things that are going to affect the ability to go out and perform our duties the way that we should. And initially, short term, we know that each day that the reform bill is as it's coming forward, the goalposts are being moved, so to say. So the laws haven't been set. The Commonwealth has missed every major deadline so far in order to enact the reform, to get the commission set up. So it's our job as lieutenants to make sure that we're pushing out the important things to our officers so they understand what the guidelines are for when they go out there and they encounter the public and what they're supposed to do, so that we can set them up for success and we can set the public up for success for what their expectations are for us. So short term, it's getting a full grasp and understanding of what the reform entails and how we can tailor it to fit the department's needs, and ultimately what the citizenry, what their needs are and what their expectations are from us. Long term, the reform affects us in several ways. It affects us right now. There's an environment in law enforcement that it's not a high environment. We're having difficulty with recruitment, retention, and attracting qualified candidates to be able to come take this job. And reform is a part of that. And it's important as leaders in the department, whether you're the chief, the deputy, the lieutenant, all the way down to patrolman, it's important that we stay motivated and continue a positive interaction with the public and a positive outlook, so that we can attract good people that will want to come here. It's a very intelligent town. The majority of kids that graduate from our schools are going on to colleges. These are people that we want to come work with us, so that we can continue the service and the pride that we have. And short term and long term ramifications by it. And an issue that comes up too is case law is being decided on a national and local level every day, that impacts the way that we do our jobs. It's important that as police leaders that we continue to push for funding from our legislatures. It's push for funding from the MPTC to continue to provide our officers with the best professional development training that's out there, so that way they can be successful in their duties as they go out there and they interact with the public.
Thank you. And my second question for you is, as a lieutenant, you're going to be part of the upper echelon of leadership in HPD. If Chief Jones asked you to come into his office and said to you, I want some candid feedback. Tell me 2 things operationally that we're doing well, and then give me 2 areas operationally where we need to improve. What would you tell?
Sure. Obviously being familiar with that from my military time, that's a weekly thing of 3 things you do well, 3 things that you can improve on. In AAR, and we practice that every day. We practice that every day where we're at. Every day with my lieutenant, we talk about the things we did well during the day and the things that we're going to improve on and what we can do better for tomorrow. Where we excel on a continual basis as the Hingham Police Department is operationally, our community outreach is second to none. We have some unbelievable programs that whether it be our self-defense, our family fun days, our national night outs, the outreach that we do with our senior citizens, the outreach that we do at the different housing facilities in towns, our schools. We have more school resource officers than most people around. We excel at that. So we have that down, and we continually improve on it. Then the other thing that we do well, we're doing a good job of hiring. We're getting good, competent officers that are from here that understand the town and understand what it takes to be an actual community police officer, the type of officer to work where you're from. So we do very well at that, and that's something that hopefully we'll be able to continue to do. Some things that we can always improve on. One of the things that we have is the majority of our department, over 25 of our officers have under 10 years on the job, and that is a major generational difference from the majority of that are 21 plus. They learned how to do the job completely different from what is being taught now, and even what's necessarily being taught when I started 11 years ago. So we need to continue to work on developing mentorship programs and leadership programs to bridge that generational gap, because the officers that are 10 years and under, there's not a lot of years experience there of being practitioners in law enforcement, and their attitudes are different. Their perceptions are different. Whereas police officers that came on in the early 90s they were trained completely different, and they were brought up and raised on the job completely different. So we need to continue to develop leadership programs and mentorship programs to bridge that gap, so that way everybody can work together and be on the same page. And we need to create more opportunity for our officers. We need to think outside the box. Policing is steeped in tradition. One of the things you'll hear about me often is that I try to be an outside the box thinker and try not to be in the traditional realm of policing. We need to be outside the box with how we're going to develop opportunities, because when the majority of your workforce is young, 25, 26, 27 years old, they're going to look to see if there's a light at the end of the tunnel for them. They're going to want to know that if I put my time and effort in here, if I show up every day and I'm a lunch pail guy and I'm a first in, last out type of guy or girl, that there's going to be something in it for them, that there's going to be opportunities so that they can find value. Because the one thing that I've learned in teaching college and in teaching at the recruit level academy is that the difference in the generation now with our younger officers, that they really want to feel valued about what they do. They want to find importance with what they do, and we can provide that for them. We just have to think outside of our normal traditionary policing practices. We could do that with being progressive and with just taking some calculated risks to think outside the box and try something. And right now, as we're making the change, when we've changed into a new administration, we can kind of hit the ground running on that. I think that would be very beneficial to us moving forward.
Sergeant, I wondered if you could please describe an emergency situation in which you played a leadership role. If you could describe the situation, the role you played, and what you learned from it.
Sure. So I can point no further than some of the issues that we had this summer with some of the different standouts and demonstrations and protests that we had that were different pop-up ones. They would call the day before and say, hey, we're coming out to do a standout at Route 3A, or we're doing it at the bathing beach. The first one in particular was interesting because it was coordinated by a group of youths that called up and said, hey, listen, this is what we want to do. And one of the things was speaking with the chief is like, we're going to coordinate this. We need to go out, and much like you see in the new reform law, it states that we want you to go out. You have to meet with people before they go out and do these things. We were already doing that. We had met with the stakeholders that were involved in that standout. We kind of told them what we understand why you're here. We support your reason for being here. We understand everything that's going on. Our goal is to protect you from traffic, because 3A is a major area. In the summertime, there's a lot of cars going through there, and then a lot of people showed up, and there was a large standout, and then there was a lot of out-of-town actors that showed up that were intent on trying to cause problems, that were insulting towards the officers, that were insulting towards some of the general public. It turned into a hairy situation, but because of our collaboration with the stakeholders that were involved in it initially, we were able to avoid any major incident. And it turned into, obviously we saw what it turned into when it hit the news media and when it hit some of those different outlets. We were able to avoid any major incident there because we met with all the people involved. We told them what the guidelines were and what our effort was. We hung back to let them get their message across, but we're intent on letting them know that, like, our only goal here for you is to be safe. We're supportive of you getting your message out. We're supportive of you and your right to stand here, but we want to make you protected so that you feel safe and that the general public feels safe as well. And what we found from that was that was almost kind of used as the blueprint moving forward as some of these things escalated into different groups, into different areas, and different groups of people getting together that had differing viewpoints. And I was proud of that because, again, it was a snap standout where it was just like, hey, you have less than 24 hours to be able to plan manning for this. And some of the things that we were able to do to essentially, de-escalate ourselves in a sense was we didn't wear hats. We didn't wear our sunglasses. We were doing everything we could to let you know that we're human and that we're here. We're seeing you. We're not looking at you through a different lens, so to say. we're just here and we're here to support you. And that was a situation that was, you know, pretty tumultuous in the beginning, but because of the work and effort that we put in prior, during, and after, we avoided any major incident.
Thank you. And my second question, you mentioned earlier that you were recently named as the Civil Rights Officer for the department. I know that you're aware of the Unity Council and some of the efforts in the town. One of the messages that we've heard as we've attended some of the forums, and Chief Jones was at the race forum a few weeks ago, we are hearing that there are members of our community, either persons of color or members of the LGBTQ plus community who don't feel safe in the community or who feel marginalized. And my question to you is, as a lieutenant in the Hingham Police Department, what can the Hingham Police Department do to help marginalized members of our community feel safer within their community?
Sure. I was actually at that on that race talk. I found it informative. I was equally impressed with the number of people that turned out for it. But I think it's good for people to I think it was good for everybody to hear the folks' story, the stories that they told, and kind of how they felt, because they still had an overwhelmingly positive view of Hingham and the fact that they're you know, that they live here. I think I also have a very unique perspective. I've worked in some of the you know, some of the professions from my time at the when I worked at the National Street Jail, where the population was predominantly a minority population. So I'm aware of the system. I'm aware of what they talk about when they say, you know, how the system is failing different people. The one thing I can tell you is from all the different places that I've worked and all the experience that I've been able to gather and people that I've been able to work with, is that if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to open your, if you're willing, it's one thing to actually just hear what somebody's saying, but if you're actually listening to them, you can come together and have common ground. What we can do as a department, and what makes us stand out, is that we still have one of the only programs, and, you know, obviously COVID provide. I can talk to you about all the great things that the Hingham Police Department does. I can tell you about all our outreach efforts and all the important things that we do, but I can actually prove it to you. I can prove it to you by inviting you to our Citizens Police Academy, showing you what we go through on a daily basis. I can prove it to you by putting you in a cruiser in the passenger seat with one of our officers, where you can talk to the department, because at the end of the day, this is your police department. It's not mine, it's yours. And the citizens set the direction and the tone of how the department is going to be. If you want us to be the outreach effort in which we do, and you want us to pump that up even more, come out and talk with us. We'll talk to you. We'll put you in the front seat with one of our officers, and you can see what we go through through a daily basis. And you can tell us what you go through. I don't know what it's like to be I don't know what it's like to be a part of any of those groups. It's just, I don't know what that's like, but I can listen and I can try to help you. I can make our environment here as welcoming as I possibly can for you, so that, you know, when you come through our front door, that you're going to be welcomed with open arms, or that when you encounter one of our officers, that you're going to be treated with dignity, you know, dignity and respect every time. It's not just a slogan or a saying. That's how we're going to be to you each time. So I would encourage the outreach to happen there, but the time for talk almost has to be over. We can do it. We need to be about action now. And I think that's where we can excel. And especially once we start to ease some of these COVID restrictions, we can start having some of these community events. I just received a few of the Unity Council emails from 2 days ago, where they're talking about some of the upcoming stuff that they have. My goal ultimately, after consulting with the chiefs, is to get more of our officers involved with them, and so that they can maybe set some type of forum up where we can talk together and discuss some of the issues that we may have. Because again, a lot of the issues that are going on nationally and even statewide in some of the different areas are not here. And we want to highlight the good that we do, and show you also what we're doing to improve on that.
Thank you. Joe Fisher, questions for Sergeant Marquardt?
Yes, Sergeant Marquardt, thank you. Thank you for your service. I also want to thank you. I know you've been involved in combating fraud at Linden Ponds, and we keep seeing more and more and hearing more and more about that. So it's an ongoing battle, and I'm appreciative that you are one of the combatants here to make everyone safe. My first question for you is, would you share with me a specific example of how you help coach or mentor someone? And what improvements did you see in that person's knowledge or skills as a result of your coaching or mentoring?
Sure. Mentorship is as a sergeant right now, mentorship is the most important thing that we do on a daily basis. That's happening every day with every one of my coworkers. I try to make an effort every day to do an outreach with each of my officers. I get 5 to 10 minutes with them in the morning during roll call to impart knowledge on them and give them the plan for the day. But then I make an effort each day to meet with them periodically throughout the day, just to check up on them, see how they're doing, and make sure that everything's okay and that they understand everything that's going on, and kind of set what my individual goals are for them and the things that I hope that they'll be able to accomplish short-term and long-term. In terms of coaching, as I said in my opening statement, I've been very fortunate here. I've held a lot of positions here. So I believe that I've been able to show a pathway to success. So at times officers do come to me and they say, hey, listen, how can I be successful here? How can I know that your roadmap that you use for success, but how can I do it? And what I've always tried to coach them and mentor them and tell them is that you can't carbon copy what I did. You have to be yourself. But these are some of the things that you can do to make yourself stand out and to make yourself become a candidate that especially for any type of position or any type of leadership thing that you're looking for here. Make you be the candidate that's tough to turn down. Whether it be getting guys signed up for training. The chief and deputy will tell you that they're probably tired of me coming upstairs or shooting them emails advocating for my officers, my guys and girls that I work with, to go to certain trainings. I'm adamant about professional development for my officers. It keeps them motivated, it keeps them fresh, and it shows them the light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm always trying to do my best to get my officers the training that they need in order to be successful and attain the positions that they want. More recently, an officer approached me and said, hey, listen, I want to be a detective here. This is what I want to do. Well, this is what you need to go out and do. You need to make that extra effort on the street when you catch a case that's like, for example, a fraud case. There's a number of things that go into a fraud case that they don't necessarily teach you in the police academy. So whether it be an administrative subpoena for bank records or conducting an interview or doing anything like that, empowering those officers based on the knowledge that I gave them, but empowering them to go out and do it so that they can create a track record for themselves, so they can say, hey, I was able to obtain this experience to be able to go out and do this. This will help me transition at that next level. And ultimately some of the people that I've coached and mentored in my time here, they've been successful in obtaining the desired positions that they have here. But it's not just a one example. We're coaching, and the sergeants here in Hingham PD are coaching and mentoring every day, and for a number of different reasons.
Thank you. Next question. What do you see as the most challenging aspect of the current working environment at the Hingham Police Department? And what steps have you taken or would you propose to take to meet this challenge?
Short term, as I said in the beginning, reform is a murky water right now because we haven't met any of our benchmarks. So there's a lot of confusion, and I can tell you that because I've spoken with our local state reps and legislatures, the ones that crafted the bill, and they're just as confused as we are. So if they don't know and they wrote it, it's going to be difficult for us to know what the bounds in which we need to operate in. So short term, it's getting all of our officers on the same page, so that they understand how they can operate in the current environment, having a comprehensive understanding of the new laws that were written and how it's going to impact how we do our day-to-day job. Short term, that's the big thing, because the future's unknown, and this is the first time in law enforcement in a long time, and probably law enforcement's history, where tomorrow's not promised. We don't know what tomorrow is going to look like because it's changing every single day, because the social climate's changing. So it's important as police leaders that we continue to keep our officers motivated and keep them on the right track. The long-term ramifications are this is going to dramatically affect our ability to recruit and retain qualified officers to be able to want to come here. When your profession is constantly scrutinized, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, but when it's constantly scrutinized, it discourages people from wanting to perform that service. We've seen it in the mid 90s when we had defense cuts where a lot of people weren't joining the military because of all that. We're seeing it now with how we are in recruitment and our retention. It's nationwide. There's a lack of qualified candidates, and there's a lack of effort to be able to go out there and want to perform these jobs, because who would want to be scrutinized as much as we are today at the rate at which we are, where pretty much everything that is out there is negative. How we can combat that is to continue to provide opportunities for our younger officers. We can stem this tide. We can stem the tide. We can keep our officers motivated. We can keep the officers that we're investing time in, but we have to continue to provide them with opportunity. We have to continue to provide them with support and let them know that we support what they do, and not just use it as words, but show them in everything we do that we support what they do. Provide opportunity, keep them motivated, and they'll stay. Though the short term, the recruitment and retention effort is going to be huge. Hingham has to do a better job of going out there and meeting these challenges head on, by whether it's going to colleges or continuing the work that Officer Ford's doing at the high school level and getting more involved with criminal justice classes. But we need to attract more people to come here to show what we can do, whether we do a youth academy or something like that, but something to keep the kids, our homegrown talent, engaged, so we're not losing them to other communities or other jobs.
Sergeant, thank you.
Bill, one final question for Sergeant Marquardt.
Great, thank you. Sergeant Marquardt, we're having a lot of discussions about the town budget, as you may or may not know. And we recently discussed the HPD budget for the coming year. One of the requests of the chief is to bring back the position of a social worker. So my question for you is, as a lieutenant who's the officer in charge of a shift, how would you utilize a social worker in your policing efforts to help de-escalate issues involving domestic violence, individuals suffering from mental health issues, and individuals struggling with substance use disorders?
Sure. So the good answer that I have for you is that, being the day shift sergeant, the majority of calls that we get are mental health related. So I have a lot of experience in dealing with mental health related calls, domestic violence related calls. I worked hand in hand with our former clinician, Aileen Walsh, where she would ride around with me on duty, and we would or I'd come pick her up at the station and we would go to these calls. I believe to be successful, if we're fortunate enough to be able to get that position and get a person that works well with our department, they need to be in lockstep with the members of the force, because it's a game changer in terms of how we go out there and deal with the public. I'll give you a quick example. We had a girl that was making suicidal statements at a facility in South Hingham, and it was a facility that was crowded with people. And all I had to do was go pick her up, and we drove up there together, and we were able to use her to successfully. I just made the introduction. I was there to support her and make sure that she was safe, but we were able to use her, and she was able to, essentially clinically diagnose her, and based on her statements and everything like that, and how she was feeling, to not get her sectioned to the hospital. And that's a success of mine, because she helped, essentially, for lack of a better term, disarm her and her standoffishness towards us because of her training and ability. So it's an immeasurable tool for us to be able to go out there and use that. Hopefully, if the time comes where we can get a full-time position, I would want that. I would want the social worker and the crisis worker to be able to go out there with us to these calls, provided that it's safe and that they're comfortable going in there, because they are an invaluable tool. And we're fortunate enough where all of our officers are trained in mental health. And I forgot to mention earlier, I'm part of the CIT, the crisis intervention training. We work with these folks hand in hand on a daily basis, and we call them when we have people in crisis, with whether it be through domestic violence or predominantly now, especially in mental health. So I would strongly advocate for that position, because I've seen it. It's easy for me to talk about it. I've seen it in practice, and I know that it works, and it eases some of the burden on us, because the quick thing for us to do is to be able to sit there and say, all right, well, you probably need to go to the hospital then. but we're putting a Band-Aid on a problem that is much bigger than anything that we can handle. The social worker is able to provide all sorts of follow-on services that we necessarily can't. And that allows the person that they're dealing with to be able to, to have a sense of control of the situation and give them an opportunity to have a vote in how their situation is going to be handled. So I advocate for it big time. If we could do it.
Sergeant, we may ask you to come to the advisory committee next week if we have to really push for that position.
I hope you do.
Because
I hope you do.
I think your personal experience and testimony to the value of the role is really helpful. My final question is, what are a couple of your strengths that make you believe that you are the right candidate for this position today?
Sure. So, I always try to embody what our core values. Obviously, you want the quality traits to be of strong leadership, integrity, service, selflessness. You want that. But some of the strengths that I believe that I have is that I have the ability to self-reflect. It's not all about ego with me, and I have the ability to self-reflect and take a look that I might not have all the answers all the time. So I can trust the people that I work with. I can empower the people that I work with. And I think that's very important, especially as the higher that you go, is that you have the ability to self-reflect. I believe that my effort is second to none. I do believe that I've provided a roadmap for success here in a number of the positions that I've been able to obtain and that I've been fortunate enough to be able to attain here. So I try to continue that effort because the effort's contagious. If people see that and they see the things getting done the right way and the light at the end of the tunnel being provided for them, it will be contagious and more people will do that. I always go out of my way to make that extra effort. And I do believe that I have strong leadership skills. The people that I work with and the people that I was supervised will tell you I always try to be the first in and the last out. And I always will make sure that I do the right thing for my people, but make sure that they understand that I do the right thing for the public as well. And I make sure to draw those clear lines so that they always know what their expectations are and what's expected of them. And, lastly, I try to have humility and make sure that, people know that I'm a human too. And the people that I work with are human too. And, that's what I shoot for.
Thank you. Joe, final question for Sergeant Marquardt.
Yes, Sergeant. I really appreciate your responses here. Would you share an experience you had in dealing with a difficult person and how you handled the situation?
Sure. I think when I was first promoted, I think anytime a new supervisor comes aboard, I think one of the challenges are you go from being a peer to being a supervisor or part of management. And I think that there's always conflict in the sense that you're going to a place where they have essentially an established culture and they do things a certain way. And then you come in and you say, well, hey, listen, that's not necessarily the way that it's going to be now because of X, Y, or Z. And in the beginning, new supervisors are always tested. They're always tested because it's so important because you have to do it right all the time. Because the minute that you don't do it right all the time, people notice that and they say, well, he didn't do it right that time. So you have to be on your game all the time. And I think the conflicts, not necessarily conflicts, but the difficulty in dealing with going from being a peer to a supervisor is that you're no longer part of that group. It's different now, and it's different for a reason. So as long as you draw that clear line that says these are the standards now, and this is how it's going to be. I'm not going to say that it wasn't difficult because it was, and it took some time, but I was firm, fair, and consistent in how I was going to be. And I always let them know what the expectations were, and I always let them know what the standard was, and I never deviated from it. And it took some time, but eventually it was gotten used to.
Sergeant Marquardt, thank you.
Sergeant, thank you. At this point, I'd just like to give it back to you for any questions you have of us or any final comments you'd like to make before we wrap up this evening.
Sure. I hope that I answered all your questions. I hope that was clear, and all my answers to you. If there's anything that you need from me in terms of clarification, I could do that now. Try not to talk too much. Listen, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to just sit here in front of you. It's not, these things don't come up often. So anytime you get a chance to get FaceTime with you and the opportunity to stand in front of the stakeholders of the town and basically show yourself I think is a, it's a pretty humbling experience for me. So I thank you. These are really good questions. They're important questions that they're not the typical interview questions that you got, but they're important questions, and it's ultimately going to set the tone for what the department's future is going to look like. So I do appreciate that, because they were challenging. What I'll say is that the guys that you're going to interview here, they're great people. They're good guys. I would be happy working with and alongside any of them. You really can't go wrong. I wish you could just make all three of us, but in that sense, that they're aside from being really good police officers, they're really good people too. So you really can't go wrong. But again, I hope that I've answered your questions. I'm happy to help you out with the advisory board if you need it. I have a lot of experience with her, so let me know. And thank you again. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for putting yourself forward for consideration. I also appreciate the remarks that you've made. I really do hope what comes through for members of the public who are watching these interviews is the caliber and the integrity and the competence of the members of the Hingham Police Department. And all three of the men that we have the opportunity to interview this evening have all developed all this expertise in this through all their experience. I just think that this is I think these interviews showcase the wonderful talent and how fortunate we are in Hingham to have the police force that we do. So, Sergeant, we've enjoyed talking with you. We appreciate your kind words about your colleagues as well. And we wish you a good evening. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And Chief Jones, I think would just probably need a minute before Sergeant Smith.
That's correct. Yeah, next up is Sergeant Nicholas Smith, and he should be jumping on board with you any second now. There he is. Thank you.
Good evening, Sergeant. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Madam Chair. How are you doing?
We're good, thank you. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being patient with our process. The way that we're going to conduct this interview this evening is we will ask you to make some opening remarks, to introduce yourself to the board and most importantly to the community. My colleagues and I will take turns asking you a series of questions, and at the conclusion, we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions of us or make any final comments. So with that, I'd invite you to introduce yourself to the community if you could, please.
Certainly, thank you. My name is Nicholas Smith. I've been with the Hingham Police Department for coming up on 11 years now. I've been married for 7 years. I may or may not have just remembered the other day that my 7-year anniversary is next week. So fortunate that I caught it. I have a son that's turning 5 in a month and a half. Actually, the first time I interviewed for sergeant was the day after he was born. That was a whirlwind. Lots changed since then. It's been quite the time in the Smith house, and very fortunate. Since I've been here in Hingham, I originally started my career with the Abington Police Department as a part-time officer, at which time I got hired full-time in 2009. Shortly after completing the academy, I found out I was going to be laid off by the town of Abington. Fortunately, at the time, Deputy Chief Brad Durant had found out that myself and John Marquardt, who you just interviewed, were going to be laid off. And fortunate for me, and I think he would agree with me, the deputy chief called, asked if we wanted to come to Hingham, and we haven't looked back. We've been very fortunate to be here. I love this town. I love this community. I love this department. I can't say enough good things about it. In my time since I've been here on patrol, I've worked in the traffic division. for many years. I also served as a field training officer, which probably one of my favorite jobs I've had since I've been here. You get to work with the new hires. You serve essentially as almost like a supervisor for one person. You make sure that that new hire, once they come out of the academy, is ready to be a police officer in the town of Hingham. It's one thing to be a police officer, but I think you take it to another level when you become a police officer for Hingham. So it's important for them to know the way that we do things. And the responsibility that was given to me in that job, I appreciate it greatly, and I didn't take it for granted. I got promoted 2 years ago to the rank of sergeant. Since that time, I've become the director of the Citizens Police Academy. It's something that I really look forward to doing. Unfortunately, with COVID, we kind of hit a block on that and it hasn't been happening. But I thought I would enjoy it, but the level that I enjoyed it, I can't even tell you. It's something to be able to get a whole group of members of the community together and hear what they have to say, and then hear from us what we do, and then we learn what they expect from us, and just opening a dialogue with members of the communities. It's a great opportunity, and it's something I really appreciate. I also serve as the head of the program coordinator for field training officers. So the things I got to do as a patrolman, now I oversee that entire unit, and there's 6 officers assigned to it. So anytime someone graduates the academy, I get to oversee that program, do the scheduling, monitor the observation reports, and just make sure everything is progressing the way it should. And I really enjoy that job as well. I think the opportunities that I've been given since I've been here have really helped me just continue to move up to the next level time after time. I think there's just the stuff that's there is definitely helpful. And that's where I am now.
Thank you. Appreciate the introduction. And I was actually on the board that first night you interviewed, and I think it was a long labor and delivery. And I was so impressed that you were able to, have a public interview and present yourself so well after what was really an eventful 24 hours. And I think I saw your son at Chief Jones's swearing in
You did, yes.
last week.
Yes.
And
Yep.
realize the time goes by quickly.
Yeah, I love to bring them to those things.
Yeah. Sergeant, I wondered to start out, I wondered if you could please talk, in particular in your experience as a sergeant for the last few years, about an emergency situation where you played a leadership role. I wondered if you could describe the situation, talk about the role you played, and what you learned from it.
Certainly. This past year in 2020, we had an issue at the shipyard, the Avalon building, that I was assigned as the officer in charge of the shift at the time, the overnight shift. I was on a double, and we were at the tail end of that double, about 6 a.m. A call came in involving an incident in one of the apartments. The caller reported the incident and also said he was essentially trapped in his bedroom with another man in the apartment with him that had a firearm. Things got crazy real quick. You go from 0 to 60, and that's what I enjoy about this job. You never know what's going to happen. You kind of have to be prepared. So with that information that we had, I made sure that the appropriate officers were responding there. That type of call is an all hands on deck. That's not, we don't leave people waiting and see where things progress. So the officers responded on scene. I was still at the station at the time, and I was informed by the patrol supervisor that he believed that the Metro-Lec, which is a regional SWAT team, would be needed to come out. So at that time, I made the appropriate calls to the Metro-Lec chief, and ended up being Chief Boteri of Plymouth, and let him know the situation we had, where it was, how many people we were aware of in the apartment, just any of the particulars I could get to him to help him make the best decision for their response. I was in contact with the officers on scene, had to make arrangements for the staging area for the SWAT team to arrive. And not long after, I had also notified the chief that we had this going on. It's very important to notify him right away. Once he was made aware, I made my way down to the shipyard to evaluate what exactly was going on, and then realize how large of a situation this was. When the SWAT team arrived, I had also put a page out for additional officers to come, and a TAC alert, which uses the officers in the surrounding towns. They'll come over and assist us as needed. And the way the whole thing panned out with you think of the person in the apartment and what's going on there. You have to look at the other situations like the perimeter, setting that up, putting the right people there, evacuating this large apartment building. It was quite an undertaking, and the adjacent apartment buildings. And I'm not going to take credit for the successful outcome that it had. Without the teamwork of everyone that we work with, including the SWAT team, we're very fortunate that we have several officers assigned to that team, and they're an asset when they're on the road with us. You have Sergeant Jeff Kilroy, Detective Mike Gervasi, and Officer Jimmy Brady. I mean, when those guys are working, you know you're in good hands. So once they were there, and then also when I put out the call for assistance, I can't even tell you how quickly people called. Officer Lisa McCracken, Jeremiah Sullivan, Brian Fernandez, they came right out. And there's so many more. I can't even do it an injustice not naming them all, but I don't have the list in front of me. And with that teamwork, being able to get that all done together, it led to a successful outcome. And not to get in the particulars of the tactics involved, because that's the SWAT issue, but they did some things that I had never seen before, and I don't think anyone had seen. And less than a month later, I watching the news and I see the Atlanta Police Department deploying the same exact tactic. And I kind of wonder if they got it from the town of Hingham. You know, it's very interesting. To be a part of it was something. It was definitely eye-opening, and the successful outcome that led to the arrest of the party, even after he fired shots out the window at officers. You know, I didn't have a doubt that it would be a successful outcome, but I'm so pleased that it ended that way. And it couldn't have happened without the work of the people that we have here. They did an excellent job.
Thank you very much. The next question, you know, there have been a lot of national conversations happening of late, and one thing that has found its way to Hingham is that we have members of our community, people who, persons of color, members of the LGBTQ plus community, who, you know, through a number of events and forums that we participate in, they say that sometimes in Hingham, they don't feel welcome or they don't feel safe. And understanding, you know, the police mission and part of what the police department is about, you know, my question is, if you're a lieutenant and you're part of the management team, you know, what can the Hingham Police Department do? What steps can be taken to try to help members of our community who feel marginalized in any way feel safe living and interacting in Hingham?
Certainly. I mean, it's disappointing to hear if people feel that way. I feel like if people don't feel safe in Hingham, maybe it sounds like we're not doing our job right. And I don't want that to ever be the case. I want people to feel accepted, to feel welcome, to feel heard. I think everyone is entitled to that right. And it's extremely important. Some things that, I mean, our officers are just happy to talk to anybody. I think something that we could even be willing to do, or I could mention, is do a type of open house situation where allow people to come in and talk to us, put faces to names, get to just have conversations, or we can go out to see them. Or if they have group meetings or whatnot, we have a civil rights officer that can speak with them. We have so many officers that could talk to them. I think at the end of the day, our mission, our core values are service, excellence, leadership, and integrity. And I think if people don't feel safe, then we're not meeting those standards. And I think I'm certainly open to talking to anyone to make sure that they feel accepted.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Joe Fisher now for a few questions. Joe?
Thank you. Sergeant Smith, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
I am doing fine. Would you share with us an example of how you helped coach or mentor someone, and what improvements did you see in the person's knowledge or skills as a result of your coaching or mentoring?
Certainly. As I said earlier, I did serve as a field training officer, and I currently am the program coordinator for field training. So I can think of a time, well, probably several times, but a time in particular where, you know, I'm assigned a new officer when I was a patrolman, and they rode with me for a month, and we went over, you know, how the Hingham police do things, making sure the foundation is there for them to be a solid officer. It's always a pleasant experience. I find I enjoy it. It kind of recharges the batteries for myself to be able to to be with these new officers that are ready to go. One officer in particular, I can remember, after it was over, he came to me and said he wanted to be a field training officer eventually. That was one of his goals. So even as a patrolman, I try to let him know, like, this is the avenue, the path I would take. This is what I did. This is the type of trainings you need to go to. This is the type of community events I want to see you participating in. The Citizens Police Academy, doing ride-alongs, going to Family Fun Day. And when the time came, is when I became the program coordinator, I did have openings for field training officers. And I was happy to see that this officer applied. And again, I treat them like everybody else, go through the resume, their letter of intent, their statistics, their events they participated in, and across the board. I mean, he was hitting every box. So I had a discussion with him and he became a field training officer. And currently he's training someone now. And just this past weekend, him and I had a discussion about going over field sobriety tests, because it was a midnight shift. It was freezing out. There was nobody on the road. So why don't you come in and we'll go over some field sobriety for the new officer. And I'll tell you, I came down the stairs and he's already going, showing him how to do it. I couldn't have been more proud watching it happen. He was doing things that I'm like, don't even know if I would have caught that. And it was really cool. To see people learn from, I'm not taking credit for all of it, but hopefully I helped build that foundation. And to watch him progress the way he has, it was something I took pride in, and I let him know he should be proud of himself as well.
That's great. Thank you. What do you see as the most challenging aspect of the current working environment at the Hingham Police Department? What steps have you taken or would you propose to take to meet this challenge?
Sure. I think something we're seeing lately, not necessarily in Hingham yet, but it may be coming. I think with the newer generation, it used to be if you took a job as a police officer, like, that was it. You were working for that community and you were doing your 32 years and that was it. It was your career. Now it kind of seems like people stay police officers, but they may bounce around a little bit. They might test the waters here or there. And so retention, I think, is a challenge that is kind of knocking at our doors. Not here yet, but I think it might be something that we need to definitely look at. There are other bigger departments that offer more opportunities. We try our best from what I see and what I try to take part in making sure people get the opportunities they want to see, but it's not always going to be there for everyone. In terms of changes that I would like to make to maybe prevent this from happening, I think you need to let people know there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If someone is interested in being a detective or being a canine officer or some other specialty, you got to give them the chance. I mean, maybe not to hold that position in a full-time, but let them know that there's an opportunity there, whether it be as a detective taking a police patrol officer, putting them in detectives for 6 months to a year. So this is what you're going to do for this time. And it can essentially serve as a farm system. The other detectives, the supervisor gets to see how they operate. Would they be a good fit? And it gives just that officer the opportunity to try something different. And I think even something as small as that would go a long way with the officers.
Sergeant Smith, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Bill Ramsey.
I was going to go. All right. Hey, Sergeant Smith, good evening to you. I want to thank you for your service to our police department. I know that you've held a lot of different positions within the department, and I want to thank you for that. I've heard nothing but great things from your leadership and your colleagues.
Thank you.
So as I'm sure you're well aware, we're having a national discussion about police reform. In fact, our legislature has just passed a major police reform bill. So my first question to you is, how do you see law enforcement changing over the next 5 years?
I think with this profession, it's always evolving. It's never going to be exactly the same it was the day you started. I've been in the profession for 15 years or so now as starting part-time and then going to full-time. And if you had told me then 15 years ago that, police officers would be administering Narcan to people, or having mental health professional go with them to calls, or going to at-risk people that you think may overdose and giving them services, I would have said that there's no chance that's going to happen in this field. And yet here we are, and I think it's excellent changes. So you have to be able to evolve in this field. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind and really be no use to anybody. So I think down the line, 5 years from now, I think I'm open to discussion, particularly the mental health crisis that is going on in this country right now. I welcome the opportunity to work with mental health professionals, and I think you would find every officer here would want to do that. And I think 5 years down the line, I would like to see a full-time, at least one full-time mental health professional that's able to be there to help us out, because we hold ourselves to a high standard, and I feel we do an excellent job. But to have another tool in the tool belt is an amazing thing, and I think it could help a lot of people. So in regards to reform, I think the going with mental health professionals is big, and I also know that there's talk of the post-reform and post-training standards that come in with the reform. That's something that's been going on throughout. Usually the West Coast starts a lot of things with policing, and it trickles its way over to the East. That's something that's been going on for decades, and I'm welcome to that as well. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd like a seat at the table a little bit and a discussion on reform, but I am not opposed to it whatsoever. I think change is a good thing, and change can be a great thing. And I think it's something that in the long run will probably help us all out.
Thank you. And my second question to you is, as a lieutenant, you're going to be part of the upper echelon of leadership within the HPD. If the chief asked you to come to his office one day and said to you, I'm looking for some real candid feedback, want you to tell me 2 areas where we are doing well operationally, and tell me 2 areas where we need to improve operationally, what would you tell him?
Well, with the things that we're doing well, I would start off with the community policing aspect of this job. I think the things that we do here aren't like anywhere else. The Citizens Police Academy is the longest run academy in the state, as far as I know. And I think that's a huge thing when you can get a group of people, not a one-on-one, which is an awesome experience as well, being able to talk to somebody, but you get a group of people together, almost like a melting pot of people, and discuss what's going on in the community, how we do things, what they expect from us, is a great thing. It's a valuable tool. The things like Family Fun Day and other community events that we do, it far exceeds, I think, anyone remotely near us. And I think we excel at it, and I think other communities kind of follow what Hingham's doing, and I don't blame them. Another thing I think that we do very well is I believe we're transparent. If something goes on and someone has a question, we're going to get them the answer. Whether it be we get them the report, or they ask for our policies, or they ask what happened here or there. We're not looking to hide anything. We're going to talk about it and let you know what went on. I think you need the public trust, and you're not going to have it without transparency. So I think that's something that we do great. Things that we need to work on. I think I would go back to what I had said earlier about providing a little more opportunities, or the chance for opportunities. Again, a light at the end of the tunnel for our officers to know that there's something there for them. And another thing, I mean, this is just a wish list for myself in terms of something that we would, I'd like to see change. We're connected to the IT through the town hall, and Kate and Steve, they do a tremendous job. Like, they do a great job here. We're very fortunate, but sometimes there's a law enforcement, I would like to see someone assigned to the police, because we have certain issues or certain things that happen during off hours, during weekends, that's law enforcement specific, that sometimes, we can't get a hold of somebody to follow up an investigation or something like that. We can get the job done, don't get me wrong, we'll get there, but I think it would be a lot easier if we had someone assigned to us. And that's something I look forward to speaking to the chief about, because it is something I think would benefit the department greatly.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Sergeant, we'll each ask you one final question.
Sure.
What would you say are a couple of your strengths that distinguishes you from your fellow sergeants who are applying for this position?
Certainly. I can't speak for that. I mean, these are two great officers and two great sergeants that you've already spoken to. I'm fortunate to work with them, and they're great people. For myself, in terms of qualities that you'd want to see in a lieutenant, I think one of the biggest ones is being trustworthy. And you need to have the trust of your employees that work for you on the shift. If you don't have that trust, you have a very large uphill battle to get things done and to get things done efficiently and correctly. I think that's one of the most important things. When you work with a shift and you start with them, you kind of let them know their expectations. You lay the groundwork of what you expect to be done, and you just be open and honest with them. And if you ever lose their trust, you're in some trouble, and it takes a lot to earn it back. So I think being trustworthy is something very important to being a lieutenant or a supervisor in general. And I like to think, and I believe I fully have that on my current shift, and we have a great group. I can't take credit for it. These guys, they do an excellent job. And another quality, like I've spoken with before, you have to be able to evolve and adapt. No situation is going to be the same. You may think you're going to a call and something's one way, and then you get there and it's flipped completely upside down. So you have to be able to improvise, adapt, and get things done. Again, that goes back to the reform and the changes in this profession. You just have to be able to continue to march. You're going to get the job done regardless, but you may have to think of it a different way than you did the day before. And again, that's what I enjoy about this profession.
Thank you. Joe Fisher, final question for Sergeant Smith.
Yes, Sergeant. Would you share with us an experience you had in dealing with a difficult person and how you handled that situation?
I think offhand, I can't think of an exact situation, but generally, if I'm dealing with someone and there's a disagreement, or we just seem to be butting heads and can't, get to a resolution, come to an impasse, I find the best thing that you can do is just communicate with them, but not communicate to talk, communicate to listen. You need to actively listen and understand where they're coming from and what is going on. Sometimes people need to blow off steam. Sometimes people are correct and you're thinking of it the wrong way. And I think just actively listening and hearing what is being said to you and digesting it, a lot of times can come to a resolution. I think that's, again, communication is key.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Bill, final question.
Sergeant Smith, in response to a previous question, you kind of touched on some of the benefits of utilizing the social worker in your policing efforts. We're going to ask you to expand upon that a little more. As part of the HPD budget, there's been a request for a social worker that has been supported by this board. Can you tell me, as a lieutenant, someone in charge of a shift, how would you utilize a social worker in terms of de-escalating issues involving domestic violence, de-escalating issues involving individuals who are exhibiting mental health issues, or individuals with substance use disorders?
Certainly. One of the trainings I attended pre-COVID was for crisis intervention team training, and it was put on by Aspire Health Alliance, which is the mental health group that we work with at this time, that has provided in the past a mental health professional to the department. I found that training to be very valuable, just in learning specifically the things that you talked about, how to deal with people in crisis, domestic violence type issues. And as a lieutenant, should we be fortunate enough to get someone in that field, that profession, that's something I would like to try to bring to the patrol level and let them basically be trained, whether it be a roll call, do a roll call training once a week, have the mental health professional come down and give their take on this is how I would deal with the situation. This is the avenues that are best for you. I think that would be a tremendous asset to be able to have someone there just to show us the current, the go-to models of how to handle these types of situations. But also, anytime we had a report that came across my desk in terms of mental health, I would bring that to their attention and ask them, how should we proceed? What is your thought on this? This is how we've done it in the past, but let me know, is there a better way? I think just being able to use that person as the asset that they are would be just a very good opportunity for us.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Sergeant, at this point, I would, I don't know if you have any questions for us or any final comments you'd like to make before we conclude the interview.
No, I would really like to appreciate, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. You know, I've been through a few of these and it's always a little nerve wracking before you come in, but I truly, I thank you for your time and your dedication to the town and to the importance of these positions and recognizing that and putting some very good questions out there that definitely made me think. And hopefully through my resume and in my speaking with you tonight, I've kind of put across that I think I am the right person for the job and I would do an excellent job as a Hingham Police Lieutenant.
Well, Officer, Sergeant, excuse me, I think it's our turn to thank you. Thank you for putting yourself forward for consideration. Thank you for all the great work you've done for Hingham. I would just say on a personal note, it has been just a tremendous privilege to watch you advance and grow as a member of the Hingham Police Department. I think that we were so fortunate that that Abington, we appreciate that Abington made it possible for you to come to Hingham. And we thank you for not only the materials that you provided to us in advance, but also the conversation this evening. So with that, we'll wish you a good evening and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too. Chief Jones, I know you're proud of your officers and your sergeants, and tonight they demonstrated why. This is not going to be an easy decision for the board, but I think again it just speaks to the caliber of the talent that we have in the Hingham Police Department, and I hope the citizens feel as fortunate as we feel right now that the men and women of the Hingham Police Department are here and are. It's been a wonderful night for the department, starting with the appointment of the deputy and now this evening. So I think that you know, our typical process for members of the public who are watching is that Tom, I think in 2 weeks, is that right?
Yeah, yep, 2 weeks. Yep.
So part of this process is also there is an interview panel that goes on. We will get a recommendation from Chief Jones, but we typically leave a window of time so that if members of the public wish to send us an email or contact us with any feedback that they have. But we will look forward to having Chief Jones return at one of our upcoming meetings to make his recommendations for the board's consideration. So Chief, thank you again.
Great, thank you very much.
It's been a really good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is Inside Town Finances. Michelle, I think you've maybe got a couple slides. This is actually volume 10. We're into double digits now. And volume 10, which will be posted on the town website tomorrow, deals with enterprise funds and sewer. And you know, the first question, and Michelle, if you could advance the slide, is what is an enterprise fund? And an enterprise fund is actually, it's a separate accounting and financial reporting mechanism for services that we provide that are funded by user fees. And Massachusetts actually authorized the creation of enterprise funds in about 1986. And typically in municipalities, you establish an enterprise fund for business-like activities such as utilities or recreation. As the slide indicates, the key thing with an enterprise fund is it's self-supporting. And what that means is that the revenue collected by an enterprise fund is greater than or equal to the expenses of an enterprise fund. Slide, please, Michelle. So the next question is, well, does Hingham have any enterprise funds? And we have two, and we have another activity that kind of behaves like an enterprise fund. In 1987, the South Shore Country Club Enterprise Fund was established. And in 2019, by a vote of town meeting, the Weir River Water System Enterprise Fund was established. And basically for both of these entities, all of the revenue that's collected from user fees is used to offset expenses. Our sewer commission provides sewer service to about 2,700 residents and businesses, I think about a third of the town. And while it's not an enterprise fund per se, it very much operates like an enterprise fund. It is self-supporting. It collects revenue, and that revenue supports operating and capital expenses. Next slide, Michelle. So how does an enterprise fund work? Well, basically, the enterprise fund collects fees for services, and it has its own accounting financial statements. So all of the revenue goes into the enterprise fund. And that enterprise fund revenue is then used to fund operating and capital expenses. And if there's a surplus left at the end of the year, those are considered retained earnings, and those remain with the enterprise fund. And they go back into the enterprise fund to potentially fund additional capital or to potentially fund rate stabilization. And enterprise fund budgets, people may remember that we reviewed the enterprise fund budgets this year. The advisory committee reviews them, and town meeting ultimately authorizes them. The next slide, please, Michelle. So we've been looking at the 5-year forecast quite a bit. And one of the questions is Hingham's 5-year forecast affected by these enterprise funds? And the answer is no. As part of our town revenues, the water, the sewer, and the country club revenues are there, but they also have equal and offsetting expenses. So if you think about, we've been talking quite a bit over the past few weeks in budget meetings about the fact that we have a deficit right now for our budget. That is unaffected by these enterprise funds. So if you look at the revenue on the 5-year forecast, it matches the expenses. Which leads to just the final question. Could enterprise funds be used to, could taxpayer dollars be used to support an enterprise fund? You like that, Tom? You like the bridge? Tom and I have been talking about bridges a lot today. Only as a bridge loan. In the unlikely circumstance that an enterprise fund had a short-term operating loss, the town would step in and provide a short-term bridge loan. And then the enterprise fund would need to pay that bridge loan once it received additional user fees to pay that off. So again, you know, we have these enterprise funds in the forecast. It's a separate accounting system. The money remains within the fund. It doesn't affect our 5-year forecast surplus and deficit. And again, in the unlikely sense that there could be a short-term shortfall, that the town would need to step in. So that's just a quick look at our enterprise funds. That's part of the forecast. Bill or Joe, I don't know if either of you have any questions.
Real question, Mary. When we do bridge a shortfall to one of our enterprise funds, do we take it from fund balance?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes. Yeah, it comes from fund balance. Yep. Yep.
Thank you. That was great.
Okay.
Mary?
Yes.
Where does HMLP fall? Because it seems to meet the description of what you just presented.
So actually, Joe, HMLP is somewhat unique in that HMLP pays, instead of paying a property tax bill, which the Weir River water system pays, for example, what the South Shore Country, what HMLP does is they pay a payment in lieu of taxes. It's called a pilot. And that pilot is about $500,000. And that is basically what HMLP would pay if they paid property taxes. So where an enterprise fund has all the revenue and all the expenses from operations that come through the town, HMLP is actually a standalone. And the only thing that comes into our 5-year forecast is that payment in lieu of taxes. So they are a much more separate entity.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I see a hand. Diane DiNapoli, you have a question or comment?
Hi, Mary. Yes, thank you. Can you explain briefly why is the sewer and the light a separate enterprise fund? How does it distinguish itself from a traditional fund?
Sure. And Diane, just before I answer that, could you please give your address for the record?
I'm sorry, 16 Gardner Street, Diane DiNapoli.
Thank you. So I think I just explained, I think I answered one part of your question, about HMLP, where basically they are a separate entity and the town collects a payment in lieu of taxes instead of a property tax bill. The reason that the sewer is an enterprise, it behaves like an enterprise fund, is really twofold. First of all, it's a fee for service kind of activity, which is a little bit different than like government. You know, the police department or public works, we collect fees for some things, but sewer is a fee for service. The other thing to remember is that in the town of Hingham, only about 1/3 of the town is sewered. So if you think about that, you know, you and I as taxpayers, our tax dollars shouldn't be used to support a service that you and I don't have access to because neither of us live in a sewer district. So the idea with an enterprise fund, or the way we've set up the sewer, is to separate it so that the people who are using the service pay into it, and that funds the expenses. Similarly, with the Weir River water system, it services Hull, and it services a few hundred homes in North Cohasset. And we have Hingham customers who are on well. So when the legislature actually adopted enterprise funds, they did that because of some of these business-like activities that are fee for service that not all the residents have access to. So I hope that answers your question. Anyone else? Okay, Tom, COVID-19 update.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. So the COVID-19 update for tonight, according to the public health data from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health released last week, the town's designation remains yellow again, indicating a medium risk of spread in the community. There have been 85, last week was 88, new cases of COVID-19 in Hingham over the past 14 days, and a total of 1,657 cases in Hingham since the start of the pandemic. The average daily incidence rate for the town of Hingham was 25.3 per 100,000 residents, and our percent positivity rate was 2.68% for the previous 14 days. As of today, confirmed COVID-19 cases in Massachusetts totaled 569,620. Public health metrics have been trending in a positive direction statewide, including drops in average daily COVID-19 cases and hospitalization rates. However, those rates remain higher than they were before the surge hit in the fall of 2020. Regarding vaccine rollout and reopening plans. So according to DPH's daily COVID-19 vaccine report, over 946,000 people in Massachusetts have been fully vaccinated as of today. The DPH has started to report vaccination rates by community each week. As of March 11th, approximately 14% of Hingham residents have been fully vaccinated. This is great news. At this time, all Phase 1 priority groups, as well as some Phase 2 priority groups, are eligible to receive the vaccine in Massachusetts. Eligible Phase 2 individuals include people age 65 and over, individuals with 2 or more certain medical conditions, residents and staff of low income and affordable senior housing, and K through 12 and early childhood educators, child care workers, and K-12 school staff. DPH announced today that they will release the schedule for all remaining groups in Massachusetts's vaccine plan tomorrow. Every resident will know when they are eligible for a vaccine. This information will contribute to the town's reopening plans. We continue to closely monitor public health data, including the new statistic of community vaccination rates, and continue to assess our plans to reopen public buildings. We will look forward to reporting back to the board and the public on specific plans at a future meeting. It's important for everyone to continue using all the tools available to help us stop this pandemic, like covering your mouth and nose with a mask, washing your hands often, and staying at least 6 feet away from others. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Joe, any questions for Tom on the COVID-19 update?
None, thank you.
Bill?
No questions.
Tom, I just want to extend my appreciation to you and to Susan Sarney. Last week, you both worked very hard to secure some vaccines for some of our teachers. That, you know, as we all know, part of getting back to school it includes vaccinating our teachers. That is an extra level of assurance that I think we would all agree is very important. There are many steps being taken in a lot of different ways, including members of the community helping our teachers make an appointments. But I do just want to acknowledge the efforts on your part and Susan Sarney's part to try to secure vaccines for our teachers. This community effort is going to help us continue to make inroads, and again, is just, I think, going to bolster our ability to, as our students return to school for more hours in the day and more days in the week. So thank you very much.
Welcome.
Is there anyone in the public who has a question or a comment with respect to the COVID-19 update? Bill?
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, could I follow up on that question? Tom, I know that, again, I want to echo Mary's appreciation for securing some vaccines for our teachers. Have you and Sue been able to administer those vaccines to the teachers in Hingham?
Michelle, do you know if that has happened yet? I believe that's still in the planning stages, right?
Yeah, I think she has a limited number of first doses available, and that's it. So we are offering those first to the school department, and then she was working with the folks at Empathy LLC, and they're going to be administering the doses that they have to our school folks.
And those ones we were lucky enough to get first and second doses through Empathy for some 70 or so folks as well.
And is Empathy making a commitment to prioritize our teachers if possible?
They're doing solely teachers, yes.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. Good to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think, Tom, my understanding as well is that, again, we're all, you know, it's a supply and demand kind of thing. So, you know, we continue to look for all different sources and all different opportunities to continue to vaccinate members of our community and employees who work for the community. We understand the governor's position with respect to our local clinic. We stand ready to reopen it if that would be the governor's wish at some point. And in the meantime, we're just trying to seize on any opportunities that we have to keep it going.
You know, very well said, Mary. If you don't mind, I just want to elaborate on that for a second. Do you mind?
Please.
So we're going to have a long list of people to thank at the end of this pandemic, and we're not going to be able to do it justice when that time comes. But one group that we need to reach out and raise up often and significantly is the folks over at the Baptist Church. They donated their space. They came to us and asked us if they could help, and they donated it free of charge. And if we were given the vaccine by the state to be able to provide shots locally, we would have been able to, through our vaccination program using our paramedics at that facility, we would have been able to vaccinate approximately 1,000 residents a week. But obviously for bigger decisions were made to prioritize mass vaccination clinics, as is their right to make those decisions. I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions, and it is what it is. But thanks in large part to the Baptist Church. We stand ready to be able to provide that level of service should be asked going forward.
I'm so glad you jumped in and mentioned that, Tom. Thank you. Selectmen and Town Administrator reports. Michelle?
Not tonight, Mary. Thank you.
Tom?
Not tonight. Thank you.
Joe?
Not tonight, other than to mention that tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day.
You always get the holidays. I'm so
Gotta
glad.
get it in. People need to be
Bill?
celebrating.
Nothing tonight.
I would just mention two things. Tomorrow night, I will be celebrating St. Patrick's Day with the Library Board of Trustees. Chair Lucy Hancock is on the line. I want to thank Lucy for scheduling a meeting on St. Patrick's Day. But no, all kidding aside, as a member of the trustees in my capacity as chair, and I know that the library has been working hard, and I'll look forward to reporting back to the board on, you know, the progress with reopening and other things. I would just also mention to the public that we will actually be meeting this Thursday, March 18th. We will be reviewing a couple of warrant articles that we did not take up this evening. And most importantly, we will be having a discussion about the FY22 budget. Our board is scheduled to vote budget recommendations next Tuesday. The advisory committee will be voting 2 days later. And Thursday is an opportunity for us as a board to have some conversation about an updated forecast, as well as options for a path forward. I want to acknowledge that the board has received a number of letters from citizens, and we appreciate them reaching out with respect to their views about funding and budget. And I would also just remind everybody that we still have a ways to go in this budget process. And I think we've heard from some residents who are concerned that additional requests were removed from the forecast. And I understand the concern about that. And I can assure the community that this board, the advisory committee, our school committee colleagues are working very, very hard to find a path forward that meets the needs of the citizens and balances all the many considerations. That process will continue and come to conclusion over the next week. Before adjourning, I do see a hand. I'd recognize Sean Galvin. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Mary. Hi, everyone. And I'm Sean Galvin at 143 Fort Hill Street. And I just wanted to check in to see where you are as far as the rescheduling of town meeting from April 26th to the plan of May the 8th with rain dates of May 15th and 16th to be conducted in an outdoor setting this year, and to see where you are on the rescheduling of the town election.
Sean, thank you for the question. Tom, could you answer Sean's questions?
Sure. So, Sean, we are still planning for a May 8th town meeting. And you've explained it very clearly. Outdoor town meeting, May 8th, with the rain dates of the 15th and 16th. The election is still a pending date. We're still working on that, where as we go through the budget process, there are implications to what that date needs to be legally and otherwise, and we still need to work through that. But hopefully we're going to know that here in the next week or two.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. With that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Oops. All those in favor, Joe.
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Mary, I.